Belinda presents this unabridged recording of Heavy as a Mountain, written by Vincent Connolly and read by James Saunders. The dedication reads for Robert, Chris and Gemma. Part 1. The Great Enterprise, September 1941 to February 1942. Now the name you bear must be honed to a bright edge, for like a great sword it has come to us in splendour from an age long ago. Otomo no Yakamochi, 718 to 785. Lovebirds. Toshi thinks it's an inauspicious beginning to their marriage that his bride dislikes the wedding present he's bought her, but he'll soon do something about that. The tiny bird lies trapped in his left hand, not screeching now, its little heart racing against the skin of his enclosing palm. In his right hand, he holds mother's long dressmaking shears, silver points lethal. He looks at the ornate bird cage, remembering the portion of his lieutenant's pay that it cost him. He's about to do the deed when Sachiko, his bride, comes into the room. Her jaw drops, and she makes no sound for a moment, perhaps trying to make sense of what she sees. Then comes the long scream that must surely alarm the entire household, the first of many, as she runs across the tatami and throws herself at him, her small fists beating him around the head. He's at a disadvantage. Release the bird and it will be a great nuisance catching it again. The shears will be a danger to Sachiko if he tries to catch her up in his arms to restrain her, even more of a risk to himself if he drops them and she gets possession in this mood. He bows his head over and presents his back to her, which she pummels while he shouts at her. This will now be a public dispute heard not just by the family, but by the neighbouring suburb. He calls on her to control herself. It seems to have the opposite effect. He begs her to let him explain, tries to order her to sit on the bed and listen to him. He will not harm the bird. When she finally lets him, he puts the bird back in the cage with its nervous companion, stows the scissors, and takes his weeping bride in his arms, caressing her, soothing her. When he kisses her neck, he feels the rushing of her pulse through his lips. I mean no harm to the birds, he tells her. If some of their feathers are trimmed, then we can let them out of the cage, close up all the screens so they don't fly away. They'll still fly around the room, but more gently, less likely to hurt themselves, to knock things over, easier to catch again. You never asked me first. They're mine. You gave them to me. You don't like them anyhow. No, you don't try to understand. I love them. I just felt sorry for them having to live in their cage. They're birds. They want to fly. They will fly, but you'll hurt them. He holds her close, tries to explain that birds feel no pain from their feathers being cut, that he has asked others, knows what he's doing. He's a flyer himself, after all. The birds will be happier and stay close to their nest. She doubts him and says, Why not just let them out, see what happens? When Toshi opens the cage, the two lovebirds take some time to find their way out, not surprising, as it's a largish structure with beautiful towers and turrets formed from fine white bamboo strips. When they make their exit, the birds race around the room with blinding speed, stopping suddenly to perch briefly on every surface, to peck at this and that, and then they're off again. Sachiko is delighted. When Toshi arms himself with a broom and tries to catch the birds to put them back in the cage, he's the one that knocks things over, and then they're both laughing, Sachiko screaming as loudly as before when one bird lands a shit on his trousers. He looks at her and feels his heart bursting at her happiness. It's worth this disorder just to hear her laughter. How different she is from any of the other young brides that could have easily been arranged for him. A person of passion, of exuberance, grown up in Yokosuka, home port of his carrier fleet. Now she thinks there's a better way of getting the birds back into the cage. She puts a little seed about, makes a show of putting more seed and water in the cage too. She and Toshi sit on the bed with arms around each other, quiet, barely a move, and the birds eventually find their way back. Simple creatures, food, water, and companionship is all that's needed. Toshi feels such pride and love for his bride and tells her so. She closes his words with her own mouth and then tells him she should sponge that mark off his trousers before it sets. She undoes his belt, his buttons. Sachiko. In the morning light, Sachiko stares at Toshi, still something of a strange creature to her as he sleeps in her bed, one that seems to be the only thing in the house not yet awake. She can hear the family, her family now, up and about their business, have been for some time. Every sound travels through these thin walls, and she feels embarrassment at having to constrain herself more in this household, to suppress any sound that might betray too much emotion, anger, joy, rapture. She's already taken the night cover off the lovebirds' cage and brought them to twittering, kissing life in their ornate cage. She's glad they've been able to fly around the room, at least as free as these walls allow, and they return to their home happily enough for a little seed and water. She hears a new commotion, a car, conversation. She slips from the bed to the window. Nothing in sight. She sees the raked gravel of the garden, pink in the morning sun, the ridge-tiled shed where Toshi's father has, no doubt, already trimmed anything unsatisfactory that his bonsai may have produced while he slept. All this cutting away to improve things, leaves and roots, feathers, disorder, emotions, is it such a good thing? She favours abundance over elimination. What if too much is cut off? So she can sit on the bench at the window, she moves Toshi's white naval uniform, the jacket and cap with their insignia. She's been instructed in the meaning of these, stripes of a first lieutenant, wings of a pilot, and so on. It's important to know what each person does, who's in charge of whom, and clothes are a language. More interesting to know what a person is. This is not always visible. She picks up her husband's crumpled shirt and holds it to her face, breathes in his scent. She moves his ceremonial sword too, and as she picks it up, it slides from its scabbard, exposing a short length of shining blade. Where the craftsman has beaten layers of fine steel together, there are unexpected veins, seen but not felt under the touch of her fingertips. She thinks of blood. Sachiko looks out of the window again. She and Toshi have been given the best room with the finest view, top floor of the 2-story residence overlooking the large cemetery. Where she grew up across the bay, it was more shipbuilding and docks. In this part of Tokyo, death seems to be the thriving local industry, part of the fabric of the district. When she goes to the local market street by any route, she can't help but pass 4 or 5 temples, each with its own graveyard. When Toshi walks her from Nippori Station to his home, their home, he always takes the most immediate path, up the old mossy stone steps, then down through the narrow pathways of the big cemetery, past graves with their sombre memorial planks, tall as men. There are many large crows and always cats that have made the cemetery their home. Toshi seems to think no more about this place than a walk from bedroom to bathroom. She supposes it's a matter of what you've grown up with. And it's been made clear to her, gently by father and more robustly by mother, that she has entered a family of high culture, with much honour accumulated through a long tradition of service to emperor and nation. When she first met Toshi, she already knew enough about the Navy to know her fighter pilot could only be well-bred and scholastically exceptional. Now she will have to adapt, make herself part of this small unit. Movement below attracts her attention. A naval rating, second class she can just discern, is guiding a driver, whose rank is not yet apparent, into the narrow lane between the house and the cemetery. As the limousine noses into view, she sees pennants on the tiny flagpoles mounted on the headlamps. She jumps up. The sword crashes to the floor. "Toshi! Wake up, Toshi!" Uncle Fuchida. When Toshi leads Sachiko downstairs, Uncle Fuchida is already holding court in the main room. He looks comfortable here, happy to see them. Ha! The newlyweds, finally out of bed. Younger brother Mitsuo sits cross-legged, excited at his uncle's feet. Father is delighted to see his old friend. Their friendship is the reason for the honorific uncle. Mother rushes about, trying to organise for this unexpected visit. Toshi feels a little uncomfortable in his hastily donned ceremonial whites, while Fuchida looks ready for real business in his greens, the insignia of a commander. But what business could it be? After a flurry of greetings and bows, Mother pulls Sachiko aside to help. Fuchida resumes a discussion with Father, the slow progress of the Chinese war in the face of grinding opposition. Many like him believe there are easier pickings elsewhere, a view that has gained strength. His business here is then finally revealed, the start of a great new enterprise in East Asia, the creation of a new regional order. He looks at Father, his eyes glowing. It will all be possible because of our mighty naval air power, which I have the honour to lead, and your son will be part of it. He beams at Toshi. In 2 days, your waiting will be over, my boy. You will be one of my flight leaders. Mitsuo leaps to his feet. Toshi will smash them. Father claps his hand. A toast! Bring some sake! Toshi feels overwhelmed by happiness. First, the joy of being wedded to Sachiko, and now this great adventure, and flight leader. He looks at his bride and draws a breath. She's frozen, devastated. A tray of glasses trembles in one hand, a jug of ice water in the other. How did two great joys become one great sorrow? She crosses the room and puts the tray down in front of Fuchida with an unceremonious clatter, lifts a glass and splashes water into it. Some of it goes on the commander's uniform. Her voice is tight with suppressed anger. I believe water is the correct toast for departing warriors. The room is silenced, each member of the family dropping their eyes. Fuchida takes the glass, gives a wry smile to Toshi, as if to say, You've got yourself a lively one here, my boy. You're absolutely right, Sachiko. The purification before battle, you've done well. He brushes some droplets from his trousers and raises his glass. A toast to this noble household. May Toshi bring it ever more honour. Father raises his glass, as did our first son, Katsuro. The name is too much for Sachiko. No, not like Katsuro. She rushes from the room. Toshi sees his family are embarrassed by the improper behaviour of their newest member. They stare at the floor, but not Fuchida. He puts down the water, grins and rubs his hands. So, how about some of that sake now? Mother follows Sachiko outside, fuming. In the rock garden, Mother throws her words at Sachiko's back. You married a Navy man. You knew he'd be away from you, maybe for a long time. Not forever. Sachiko swings around to face her. I don't want a dead husband, a wasted life like Katsuro's. Wasted? Mother catches Sachiko by the wrist and drags her across the garden, scattering marble pebbles in their wake. In one corner, surrounded by white chrysanthemums, stands a pottery urn, a memorial. See? Here is Katsuro, his ashes, but not wasted, killed fighting for Japan. His courage brings great honour to our family. Honour? I'm sick of all this honour. What use is it to you? You think it's nothing? It's won by blood. What are your feelings compared to that? Duty will be Toshi's lot too, so you be ready to lose him. This is a woman's sacrifice. Sachiko jerks her hand free, spits out the words. You say go, be killed. You don't care if Toshi dies. Double our family honour. Mother's hand comes up and slaps Sachiko's face hard, but she's already weeping, as is Mother now. Toshi steps between the two women. Please, I won't die. He looks from his mother to his wife, concern creasing his face. I promise you, I'll return. He puts an arm around each of them, holds them close, listens to their breathing growing quieter as the minutes pass, hears the bees in the autumn flowers around his brother's urn, crows calling in the cemetery trees. Mother finally speaks, soft, halting. Katsuro is gone. Now perhaps you, Toshi. I will only have Mitsuo left, of all my children. And Sachiko, Toshi reminds her. Mother bows her head. And Sachiko. Wreckage. When Toshi goes back inside, Fuchida is well into the sake and expanding on the great enterprise. Toshi already knows most of it. The plan to rip away European control of Asian colonies, to replace their British, Dutch and Portuguese masters, to give the Emperor something worthy of his title. He's taken part in many exercises where the mighty 1st Air Fleet has practiced supporting the Army and Naval Marines in their sweep across the region, the destruction of the European defences, the sinking of their capital ships. This destructive change of ownership even has a name now, the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. Fuchida goes on about attack, determination and accuracy, soldiers and airmen prepared to give their all. He's winding down when a red-eyed Sachiko re-enters the room and goes to Fuchida, bows. Forgive me, dear uncle, this has been a shock to me. Fuchida puts a big arm on her shoulder. I understand, Sachiko. We men too often forget the pain imposed by war on our womenfolk. Thank you. I will go to my room now, if you will please excuse me. Of course. I have to leave soon myself. He leads her to the foot of the stairs. Toshi watches him speak quietly to her, perhaps offering more sympathy, reassurances. He wishes he could be with her, but Fuchida has other plans. Before I leave, I will pay my respects at your family tomb. Toshi, you will join me? Father and mother busy themselves finding incense sticks and gifts. As they make their way into the cemetery, his uncle goes on with his boasting, but Toshi is distracted by thoughts of Sachiko. Suddenly he's jolted back by words of torpedoes, bombs, a daring raid. Fuchida is speaking of the greatest secret of the enterprise. It will begin with a crippling attack on the heart of the American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. Toshi stops, astounded. An attack on the Americans, not even a party to the World War of the last 2 years? This is audacious. Everyone knows there's been a naval arms race between Japan and the US for decades. A Pacific confrontation has seemed inevitable and has been planned for. But now? Fuchida enjoys his surprise. The Europeans have their hands full with their own wars. They've never been weaker in Asia. We're not making progress in China, but we can take Southeast Asia in 6 months. We just need to keep the Americans out of it for that long, even if it means going to war with them. With a first strike, doesn't everyone oppose that? The Yogeki Sakusen, the surprise strategy that had worked against the Russians. Didn't the war games find it too risky against the US? I know, but Admiral Yamamoto believes it can work. He's convinced even the army. He's threatened to resign if they won't give him his war with the Americans. They reach the family tomb, and Fuchida pours some water on the shining marble, lays a gift of a rice cake on the slab, and inserts incense sticks into the holders. Delay could be fatal, he continues. Our advantage won't last long, so we must seize what we can quickly. With their shipbuilding program, the Americans will completely outgun us in a few years. Right now, they won't suspect that we can mount a huge aerial attack from such a great distance. Fuchida examines the sotoba, the boards that mark Katsuro's death and 3 anniversaries. He nods in approval. Toshi lights the incense with his cigarette lighter and stands while Fuchida sits down on the slab of a facing tomb. The 2 men watch in silent contemplation as the sticks burn down, ash spilling on black marble. Toshi looks at the sotoba that his uncle has disturbed, the work of Buddhist monks, those who know this business of the after death. The faces of the boards are painted with Sanskrit markings, impenetrable. Among it all is the long new name the monks have provided for Katsuro to carry into the next life. Perhaps. If there is a spirit in all things, then Toshi accepts that there is a spirit of his older brother, the one who will never grow old, that lives on to serve his family, his nation, honoured and bringing honour. A soldier who gave his life in the great battle for the Chinese capital, Nanking. China. Toshi remembers his first kill there, soon after his long training, the glory of it, the whirling chase through the air, the machine guns hammering, his bullets finding their home in the enemy cockpit, the fire, disintegration, the death spiral. A victory in one-on-one combat like the heroes of old. Once he might have dwelt on the tawdriness of it, the clumsy biplane of his opponent, completely outmatched by his own sleek Mitsubishi A5M. The poorly skilled pilot, the man he killed. Somebody's brother, son, husband. A family feeling a hole in their lives that no memorial would fill. But experience and the brutalization of his initial training had insulated him from such thoughts, had made the whole business impersonal. He could convince himself that he was creating new heroic spirits, dead warriors. As they leave the tomb, Fushida breaks the rice cake and they eat it walking back. Toshi looks at the upstairs window of his home, thinks he sees someone there. His uncle takes note of where he's looking. As an old sailor, let me tell you, her tears will be a great comfort to you, to know that you are truly loved. Cherish that. He gives a rueful smile. There can come a time when they welcome a break from us. Toshi creeps up the stairs to their room, listens. Silence. Maybe she's asleep. He slides the door slowly and is shocked by what he sees. Glass on the bed where Sachiko sits looking at the window, her back to him, a picture frame scattered, the pasted back ripped from it. Her hands clutch the pieces of their torn wedding photograph. He stares at her, at this wreckage. Some sense of his presence, the blood racing through his brain, must reach out to her, for she turns, sees him, runs across the room, throws herself at him, covers his face with fierce kisses. They stand there, bound to each other, until she breaks away. "Take this," she says, holding out a piece of the torn photograph. He takes it. Sachiko in her wedding dress, a bouquet in her hands. "And I take this." She holds up the other half, him in his ceremonial whites, sword at his side. "We keep these always with us, and when you return to me, we—" Speech fails her then, and she draws his hand to hers, fits the ragged edges of the two halves together. Toshi and Sachiko. The Armada. 2 months of furious exercises later, Toshi is at 10,000 feet above the blue Pacific, part of the air armada assembling for Fushida's mighty attack on Pearl Harbor. Around him are 42 other Zeros. Spread out under him are 140 bombers. He sees the carriers below are already bringing up just as many planes on deck for the second wave. No one would ever expect to be attacked by more than 1 or 2 carriers, yet here are 6, coordinated as a single striking force in a way that no other country has mastered, protected by the Zero, the only fighter from a carrier that can match any plane in the world, all about to project this long-distance strike. Toshi is working the secret magic of this long-distance capacity, adjusting the variable pitch propeller and fuel settings for economical cruising. His Zero can stay aloft unimaginable hours for a fighter, and can cover great distances with extra fuel in its drop tank. Test pilots have continually pushed out the range of flight, and the record is now over 12 hours. Today it will be only 6 hours before Toshi is back on deck. The carrier fleet, with its 2 battleships, 3 cruisers and 8 destroyers, will stand over 250 miles north of the target, with any luck, beyond enemy patrols. He looks down again at the great fleet of bombers below him. Unlike his Zero, the 2- and 3-seater bombers each have a gunner, sitting backwards in the greenhouse cockpit. Massed in their echelons, they present a formidable defensive unit. He knows their orders by heart. Your gunners command the sky in number against any enemy attack. No matter how many casualties, you will continue in unwavering formation, since the group is stronger than the individual. Satisfied with the smooth running of his fighter, he flips again through his battle notes and sees something he has hidden among them. Sachiko's torn photo. He allows himself a brief recollection of that wedding, her joyful face, before concentrating on the order of battle. So complex the plan that Fushida has devised, attacks from many angles and heights by combined forces, level bombers, torpedoes, and dive bombers against multiple targets. Toshi thinks whatever defensive forces we meet, fighters, anti-aircraft fire, they'll find us hard to deal with. Any of the great ships that do get underway will find it almost impossible to evade simultaneous torpedo and dive bomber attacks. Timing and coordination is vital, and Fushida has rehearsed mercilessly. Even though planes have been lost and comrades killed during practice, the commander says it's worth it. And I'll have a grandstand view, Toshi thinks sourly. He looks again at Sachiko's image, remembers her shocked reaction to Fushida's call to arms, his uncle reassuring her. He wonders if that has had something to do with his assignment to a defensive group, to top cover. Doing right by a new wife, thinking of parents who have already lost one son, wanting to keep him in cotton wool. Fushida wouldn't see it that way, of course, and Toshi knows in his mind, if not his heart, that he's part of a vital reserve. Enemy fighters could turn up and spoil the party, or find the returning air armada. Worse still, their bombers might find our carriers. Maybe there'll be more American fighters getting airborne over Pearl than our lower fighters can handle. That's where the top cover will come into its own. Each one of us must contribute as part of the group. No individual heroics. But how he wishes he was going to be down there in the action, in the thick of it, in this lethal Zero. Toshi remembers the first time he saw the Zero, being buckled into it and sent up with no further instruction, how it fitted him like his own skin, how he felt as one with it. Agile, fast and responsive, he seemed to direct it with his mind. He had been flying its predecessor, the A5M, had logged his 400 hours of training before it was sent off to China and a real war. With the Chinese biplanes no match, he helped wipe their fighters out of the sky. Moving from carrier to captured airfields, the Japanese fighters chased the Chinese government as it shifted its capital further and further west. New enemy fighters appeared, supplied by the Americans and Russians, and they were more formidable opponents. But then the A6M0 arrived to replace the A5M and restore the balance. Toshi revelled in the challenge. He hasn't ceased scanning the sky, no defenders yet. His instruments indicate all is as it should be. Now he updates his position on the chart strapped to his knee. He knows that Fushida is leading them, using the radio equipment in his bomber to home the attack unerringly on the unwitting broadcast of a Hawaiian radio station. But Toshi always likes to know his own way, enjoys the business of dead reckoning, the calculations, compass, protractor, airspeed, clock. He figures the island should be rising soon, and there, through the gaps in the cloud ahead, he sees them. The first sign of their target. Pearl Harbor. Over Oahu, the sun is shining now. No cloud below them, perfect conditions. The layout of the island so clear from the models and maps they've studied. As Fushida leads them across its northern tip, the massed planes separate into their 4 attack groups. Toshi stays above Fushida's group, the high-level bombing Kates, as they swing down the western side of the island. Pearl Harbor lies before them, the white beaches of Honolulu beyond. He sees no American aircraft carriers in harbour, a huge disappointment, but one that was already known from local intelligence. They've been taken to sea, who knows where. No matter, the battle must proceed. Forces are ready to attack the Philippines, Wake Island, Guam, Thailand, and more. It all has to start today, and anyway, the battleships are the prime target. Now Fuchida's battle plan depends on whether we have complete surprise or not. If the Americans are unready, he'll fire one flare and the lumbering torpedo bombers will attack the battleships immediately. But if the Americans are alert, it will be two flares and the dive bombers will go first to destroy the defences. The base seems to be sleeping in this Sunday morning, no planes in the air, nor any being readied on the big airstrips of Ford Island in the middle of the harbour, no welcoming flak. So Fuchida fires one flare and the torpedo bombers start their slow runs. All would be well, except that some units haven't reacted to the flare, so Fuchida fires a second one. Is that a two-flare signal or two single ones? Confusion reigns and the dive bombers pile in as well. Add the Zeros already whirling in to strafe parked aircraft and the careful choreography has become an ecstatic free dance. The perfectionist Fuchida will be groaning. But when did a battle plan ever survive the first encounter? The Vals score first, dive bombing the Ford Island airfield, destroying hangars and dozens of aircraft that seem to have been lined up for the purpose of annihilation. Toshi watches the Kate torpedo bombers swing down to come around for attack, splitting into 24 from the south, 16 from the west. With more than 80 low-level fighters and bombers hitting the harbour and nearby Hickam Field, the main danger would seem to be from collision. He sees a row of what looks like 7 battleships broadside on the southeastern deep-water side of Ford Island, some berthed in pairs, unprotected by anti-torpedo nets. The Kates circle left and form a line astern, 30-second intervals, to fly low to the surface of the harbour, to drop their torpedoes into the water and strike these capital ships. It's hard to see how they can miss. Toshi sees 8 torpedoes hit the battleships, white and grey water hurled into the air, falling back slowly, smoke starting to cover the scene. Already many of the American ships are sending up defensive fire, and Toshi is surprised that they've gone into action so quickly. Even so, it looks like several battleships are already sinking, and the American war has been going less than 3 minutes. Fuchida's plan had these Kates spreading out and attacking the deep-water berth from several angles, but in action these things get simplified. The later Kates take a look and decide it's tricky getting over the hump of headland, then down to water level to release their deadly fish, so they go down the same channel the first planes used. Fine, but a lot of anti-aircraft fire is being thrown at them now from the ships moored there. Toshi sees 3 Kates dropped by hails of lead, mainly from one destroyer that's berthed broadside to the channel. Why doesn't someone deal with it? Any of those Zeros dashing about? No communication. We can build the best plane in the world, but can't make a decent radio. He wonders if Fuchida must feel this way a lot of the time. He's catching his uncle's perfectionism, or maybe it's just sour grapes, seeing fault among all this glorious destruction. The way the torpedoes are being shared around the battleships, for example. He's counted over a dozen hits now, but many have been on the same couple of ships. Maybe they're the easiest ones to hit from that channel. This odd concentration of strikes also seems to be the case on the other side of the island, where a large ship is being hit continually. Could be a battleship, but looks like a real oldie, decks planked up for target practice. Now Fuchida leads the rest of the Kates in a high-level bombing run across the harbour, each plane loaded with a huge 1,800-pound bomb in place of their usual torpedo. Plenty of flak is coming up from dozens of ships now, and they seem to be getting the range. Again, the emphasis is on the battleships, even though a lot of cruisers and destroyers are sitting in nice clusters waiting for this sort of attention. Fuchida's squad won't be thanking the commander as he takes them through the flak a couple of times, not happy with the first pass, probably trying to get the battleships that are moored inshore of others, the ones the torpedoes can't reach. Fuchida's Kate looks like it takes a hit, but it wobbles on. Then they drop their bombs. Toshi sees the hits, and then the explosion of the day, a huge fireball in the midst of smoke and debris thrown high in the air, the shockwave bumping his Zero. A magazine has been struck. He's never seen such a blow, perhaps enough to destroy the ships around it. When enough of the smoke drifts away, there are the fiery remains of a great battleship, ripped apart, sunk. When the planes assemble for the return to the carriers, Toshi sees some gaps in the formations, some losses. He tries to spot the planes of some comrades and is relieved to see the Val of a good friend, Ito. The air fleet flies away, but that's only half of it for Pearl Harbor. The 6 carriers will have brought up the second lot of aircraft and launched them, and they'll be taking over soon. Toshi and his small top cover group hang around, though, with Fuchida, who is waiting to oversee the next wave. Toshi shadows the commander as he swings round the island to inspect the airfields. The destruction is impressive: hangars and aircraft, towers and buildings burning or in ruins. It will be difficult for the Americans to mount and coordinate any defence here for a while. He sees a field full of search craft, Catalinas, perhaps 60 of them, all wrecked and smoking. Then, if this wasn't enough, the second strike arrives, 170 planes. Fuchida moves aside and lets them go to work. They divide up into their attack groups, no torpedoes this time, but plenty of the big bombs and dive bombs, lots of strafing. It's as well most of the destruction was achieved in the first minutes of the main strike, because this lot are making heavy weather of it. Tons of anti-aircraft fire shows just how many ships are still in action down there. Ships that could be destroyed if only the bombing was more accurate and target selection better. These are all planes from the carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku. Fuchida hasn't had them long, and it shows. Some bombers attack a dry dock, and Toshi sees that it holds another battleship, a great prize. But even the big bombs are missing this sitting duck, hitting some of the smaller vessels there. Now a battleship from the row at Ford Island has got underway and is steaming down the channel to break out to the open sea. About a dozen Vals are drawn to dive bomb it, and Toshi sees at least 6 hits, fires on deck, bridge damage, but their 500-pound bombs will never penetrate that armoured deck. It's still a huge steel hull, bearing those mighty cannons. Where are our big bombs? Eventually the battleship decides to stop, perhaps not wanting to block the harbour entrance. Would have been better meat for the 12 big Japanese submarines lurking outside. Smaller ships, destroyers, a cruiser make it out. They'll be harder to handle. The bombers and fighters regather for the return flight, and Toshi's top cover does have a role now. With ammunition unused and ample fuel, they are the main defence against a counterattack. Toshi is alert for any sign of enemy aircraft, the fighters or observers that might track them back to their carriers, but there are none. He tries to count the aircraft below. He sees more gaps in this second strike force than the first, perhaps 20, and the return flight is slow. Many of the planes are damaged and need to be nursed back. It's bad luck there were no carriers in harbour, but the combined fleet staff and ministry will be overjoyed that most of the battleships of the US Pacific Fleet have been put out of action. They hold the conventional view that ranked battleships as higher priority than carriers. They were prepared to lose 2 carriers for this result. Toshi knows that Fuchida rails against this stupidity. The fleet battles pitting warship against warship, the idea that the carriers are just there to help protect the warships. It should be the other way round. Toshi has heard him predict that one day the planes of the mighty carrier force will destroy an enemy without the 2 fleets ever seeing each other. When they reach the fleet now, Toshi remains high above the carriers on combat air patrol, CAP they call it. All patrol today, no combat. He floats around like a mother duck, eyes everywhere for the enemy, while the other fighters and bombers are drawn below to their nests. When the signal finally comes for the CAP to land, the front half of his carrier, the Akagi, is crammed with aircraft beyond the crash barrier. His flight is the last, and he signals to his 2 wingmen to go before him. At least he will have some distinction as the final arrival. As always, the deck, or the half of it available to him, looks ridiculously small, but he feels no pressure until he begins his approach. His engine is throttled back quietly, just ticking over to give him 10 knots above stall. The signal flags indicate 30 knots airspeed on the deck, most of it from the Akagi charging away from him into the headwind. He feels his heart rate quicken now, watches the green and red lights that are set to tell him if he is high or low. Red below green means he's too high and he'll miss the arrestor cables and meet the crash barrier, with damage to plane and career. Too low and he'll have a fatal meeting with the stern. He watches the steam jet on the deck's centre line, adjusting his approach for a slight crosswind. A lot to think about, but he knows the high tension aids his concentration. He's closing the chase on the carrier. When he lifts for a small adjustment, the Zero's nose blocks his view, but they've thought of everything. The stern of the carrier has outriggers to sight on, like arms open wide to gather him in. When the coloured lights on those arms vanish from view, it's the instant to cut the engine. The Zero drops to the deck and he feels the drag of the arresting cable on his tailhook. The deceleration is not much worse than heavy braking in a car. By the time the plane bobs to a stop, his heart is back to normal, tension gone, replaced by the frustration that's been simmering all the way home. His ground crew are around him now, helping to push him into last place across the lowered barrier, all smiles and cheers. They're almost as long-trained as he is, but they won't need to apply much of their skill on his plane today. He feels a little embarrassed before them, his guns unused, not a mark on him. Drunk talk. Amid the shipboard celebrations and the congratulatory signals from headquarters, even from the Emperor himself, Toshi quietly seethes. When the message comes for him to attend the commander in his stateroom, he welcomes it. He knows that some of his comrades envy their family connection and these meetings, drinking sessions really, that leave Toshi with a splitting headache, but he'll use this one to have it out with his uncle. He's only a little surprised to find Fuchida well into the whiskey and wanting to unburden himself of his own depression about opportunities missed at Pearl Harbor, rehearsing the sunny-side-up versions of events for consumption by high command, the blaming of others. He raves about the botches, the onshore storage tanks and repair facilities left untouched by their attack, the grave mistake of not returning for a follow-up strike. Fuchida even expects more appreciation from the Americans. Their president, he's called it a day that will live in infamy. He slugs down another whiskey, wipes his mouth. Okay, so there was a mix-up in their diplomatic halls and they didn't know they were at war with us. Did that affect the result? How many drunken gunners could they have pulled out of their bordellos with a few hours' notice? Toshi is careful to pace his drinking, anticipating a long session. He matches his commander's swigs of whiskey, but gets rid of most of it back into the glass of Coke he pretends to sip, a trick that his friend Ito, the smallest pilot on the ship, had learnt by necessity. He weaves off to Fuchida's private head from time to time, Coke in hand, returning with a freshened-up one. Even so, he's blurry enough to release some inhibitions, and he's sick of Fuchida's grumbling. Isn't this misplaced perfectionism, Uncle? You're to be presented to the Emperor himself. You should be proud, not unhappy. Not all of us get such glory. The useful thing about drunk talk is the suspension of the rigid formalities between different ranks. Say what you like and, next day, no hard feelings. The belief is it's just the drink talking, not what the person truly thinks. No wonder there's so much drinking. Fuchida scowls. Am I to take it that someone thinks he should have got a little more glory from it? Not glory, but I would have liked to get some of the action, not just be a spectator. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot this war was being put on for your enjoyment. It seems from his uncle's mocking tone that drunk talk can work both ways. The trouble with some of you fighter pilots is you think you're the Red Baron, counting up your own little victories, wasting time in dogfights for personal glory while the enemy sails by. You need to remember, my boy, nobody's bigger than the group. This is total war, not mythology, not hero against hero. Toshi feels the sting. I want to do my part, but I can't if you're keeping me wrapped up in cotton wool for my family's sake. Rubbish. I need good fighters in reserve. If the enemy had been more awake, you would have had plenty of action. Fuchida takes another mouthful of whiskey. Toshi matches him, swallowing this one. Don't worry, my boy. This is just the start. You'll get action all right. Plenty of it. Bringer of Death. As Japan stuns the world with its unstoppable conquest of the Philippines, Malaya, Hong Kong and Singapore, Toshi does see plenty of action. The first carrier striking force of Pearl Harbor is broken up, much to Fuchida's disgust, and the Akagi is set to work supporting the military advances. Toshi bears Fuchida's criticism in mind and takes his protective role more seriously. When enemy bombers are encountered, he avoids contact with any of their fighters if he can pounce on the bombers and destroy them. When protecting his own bombers, it's often enough that the Zeros maintain their defensive cover. Their reputation has become such that the enemy fighters often don't even engage. When he sees dogfighting in the distance, he's tempted sometimes to leave the cover, to join in the melee, but reminds himself that individual glory is not to be sought when the group is at stake. He knows his countrymen, as a rule, don't count personal successes. There are no records of kills painted on their machines, no talk of aces. Such success depends on more people than the pilot alone. Some exceptions are made where an enormous number of kills receives publicity, but this is carefully controlled to give a human face to the group victory. Even with these restraints, Toshi still has the occasional chance to release his fighting desires. In the first weeks, the enemy sometimes throws a large number of fighters at them and a melee will develop. This results in many hero-on-hero contests, and in these epic battles the Zero, in Toshi's hands, is unmatched. The closer the combat, the more effective is his plane. The setup of his guns makes it necessary to get in close, but then the danger is all for the opponent. The Zero can turn within any enemy turn, can loop back behind an attacker on its tail, will not stall in tight, slow maneuvers, will outclimb a pursuer until they stall and become a sitting duck. Toshi usually rounds on the lumbering enemy fighters and directs his fire into their cockpit until they fall away out of his sight. Occasionally, a parachute will appear, and sometimes someone might follow it down to machine gun the pilot. Toshi thinks this is perhaps shameful, distasteful, unheroic, but it's in line with Fuchida's wishes: destroy pilot and machine. A pilot shot down over his own territory could be back up and killing us the same day in a new plane. A dead pilot can take months, years to replace. Yes, but perhaps it's a memory of the childhood ethical instruction he received prior to his military indoctrination. Something about karmic outcomes resulting from the morality of our deeds, the fruit of action. It seems a thought to be usefully dismissed, if he could. Capturing the oil-rich territory of the Dutch, he encounters fighters that the colony has bought from America, good-looking aircraft, but already obsolete. Brewster Buffaloes are quickly dispensed with, though a few Zeros are lost. Then the Curtiss Hawk 75s, faster but no more trouble. Eventually, these fighters are withdrawn south. In the Philippines, there are more American aircraft, but these are also soon withdrawn to preserve them from constant Japanese attack. In the Singapore campaign, there are some British Hurricanes, the respectable aircraft of the Battle of Britain, but as they aren't supported by radar and control centres, most of them are destroyed on the ground or caught struggling into the air. Mostly, Toshi's kills follow the advice of the old China hands, Fuchida's preference. While plenty of success has come from the Zero's dogfighting ability, the old hands had taught the newer ones that more kills come from being first to spot the enemy and then pouncing from height. Hit and run, then climb back into it, hit and run again. To give them the edge, they found intensive ways of training their vision. Toshi has exercised his eyes by looking for stars in a daytime sky. Though he finds this hit-and-run type of combat more mundane, Toshi convinces himself of the mythology in it, imagines himself as the arrow of Apollo, hurled down from the sun, the agent of an instant and unexpected death. So, 74 days after Pearl Harbor, Toshi, gentle lover and husband of Sachiko, lover also of the small book, the short poem of Japanese and Greek mythology, has become an impersonal and dispassionate bringer of death. 1,000 Stitches. When Fuchida is flown back to the carrier from a quick trip to Tokyo and presentation to the emperor, he calls Toshi to see him. After greetings and a toast, he gives Toshi a small parcel. "From your good wife, and I was able to see your family briefly. They all seem well and send you the usual greetings." He moves on quickly, eager to share his experiences at the emperor's court. "Extraordinary. We're in a room with decorated walls, painted pines. Your father would know about the artistry. I was impressed by all the gold. A very severe official tells us how we should behave and address the emperor, or not address him, actually. We must only address the official, even if the emperor asks us a question. Then a Shinto priest comes in with an incense burner and circles the throne with the stuff. Protection, I suppose, from the evils we warriors might bring in." Toshi laughs. "And the emperor?" "Arrives in naval uniform, more gold on him than 10 admirals. Our Nagumo's there as fleet commander, gives a summary and then hands over to me for the details. I have my maps and photographs set out on the table in front of us. The emperor's chair is on a platform higher than the table, quite awkward for me looking up and remembering to tell it to the official up there too." "You were lost for words, uncle?" Fuchida grins and punches Toshi's arm. "Never. I had them lapping it up in no time. When I came to the attack, the torpedoes and bombs flying, the emperor is leaning down, eyes alight, taking in the photographs, wanting more, he and I conversing directly. Even the flunky stops scowling, and then he takes the photos to show his wife." Toshi congratulates him, and they share another toast. "Another amazing thing," Fuchida continues. "While there was always a feeling that people weren't completely appreciating the Chinese war, the euphoria about Pearl Harbor, it's brought the whole country behind our efforts. Even the liberal press has congratulated us. It's as if that attack has legitimized our warfare." Toshi can see how this might be. Rivalry with China went back centuries, but they were, after all, fellow Asians. Japanese history with the Europeans and Americans was more recent. Humiliations, domination by white nations who thought they were superior to us. The world would be seeing a different Japan now. Fuchida grins broadly. The government and high command are delighted. So different from his earlier depression over Pearl Harbor and the missed opportunities. "What about Admiral Yamamoto?" Fuchida shakes his head. "Going berserk about what should be a minor matter, that submariner the Americans captured at Pearl. He was unconscious, couldn't help it, but the poor fellow's family will be shamed. A trophy for the Americans. The Admiral is very concerned about America piling into the war, though. We have awakened a sleeping giant, it seems. At least Yamamoto is one that appreciates the potential of carriers and air warfare. He sees the future." The future, as Fuchida describes it, is one of supremacy for the carrier. Naval battles will be fought at long range by aircraft. Such a confrontation with the American fleet must be faced soon. "You and your fellow pilots, my boy, are the vital resource. We know the Americans are rushing great numbers through pilot training. They may gain the advantage in quantity, but our pilots are much longer trained and experienced. We have the advantage of quality." Later, when Toshi retreats to the relative privacy of his bunk in the junior officer's quarters, he opens the brown paper parcel Fuchida gave him. Inside is another package, this one beautifully wrapped. He undoes the layers of white tissue, finds a sealed envelope with his name inscribed on it by Sachiko's hand, and a folded cloth strip that he recognizes straight away. A seninbari, a belt of 1,000 stitches, the traditional gift from a wife to a warrior to protect him from danger. A simple white cotton waistband, the red stitches marching across it in rows of 10. He drapes the belt around his neck, opens the envelope and unfolds the letter, breathes its scent, spring flowers. He reads, "My dear husband, with all the strength of loving kindness in my heart, I pray that you are safe, that you are free from suffering, that you are at peace. At peace as much as your grave situation allows. We hear of your great exploits. The nation rejoices in them. Father is bursting with pride, devouring the news. I take pride in you as always, my brave Toshi, and know that you must do your duty. But I hope only that you will keep your promise to me. Hope only that you will soon return to my arms. Winter has been so cold without you. Tokyo is bereft of all greenery. But Father has drawn my attention to the old plum trees. Their ancient wood is dry and hollowed out by past decay. Their bark is rough. Yet they show the tiny spurs that will grow into new branches, bud into new leaves and flowers, burst into fruit. The first plum blossom will soon be here, a sign that spring must surely follow. How I hope that your business will be as quickly concluded, and that we will share this spring together. I apologize, dear husband, that I did not present you with this senenbari on your departure. I did not expect that our married time together would be so brief. As a result of Mother's careful supervision, here I present you with my humble effort. I confess I did not gather stitches from other women passing through Nippori Station as Mother had directed. Instead, I preferred to do most by my own hand. I think you trust more in your own courage and skills to keep you safe, rather than in such talismans and traditions. Take it then, dear Toshi, as an expression of my love. With every stitch I have shed a tear for you. With every stitch I have recalled 1,000 memories of the joys you have brought to me. Forgive me, your loving and devoted wife must end this now, before her heart breaks. Sachiko. Target Darwin. Finally, Fujita has a combined carrier fleet together again, 4 of the Pearl Harbor carriers and a target worthy of them. The force surges south through the Timor Sea, Akagi, Kaga, Hiryu, and Soryu, with 5 cruisers and 7 destroyers. The Akagi's airmen in flight gear assembled to hear Fujita's final briefing. The pilots look again at the maps, their path to the Australian port of Darwin, the layout of the target. They've already sketched and memorised what they each need, the disposition of ships, the town targets, the airfield. Toshi knows they share his special pride in being aboard the flagship, to know that Admiral Nagumo is on board, to have the commander himself in front of them, to hear from his lips the strategy behind their attacks. Fujita explains why it's Darwin's turn. Japan is about to invade Timor to aid in its conquest of Java. The forces that could oppose this are based in Darwin. This blow will deny the Allies the use of a vital harbour and airfield, and will destroy as many of the naval and merchant vessels there as possible. This will be the biggest attack since Pearl Harbor. Believe me, it's so important that there'll even be more bombs dropped. Succeed here, and our forces will have free rein in this area. Consider, too, the effect on Australian morale. As the commander outlines their roles and how the 4 carriers will launch all their aircraft, Toshi notes one big change from Pearl Harbor. No torpedoes. The Kates will instead be loaded with one huge 1,800-pound bomb each for dropping on unmoving targets from high altitude. Probably more effective in this harbour and easier to coordinate than at Pearl. The precision bombing will go to the 71 Val dive bombers. In another change, Fujita will get his big follow-up attack this time. A second force of 54 Bettys, land-based twin-engine bombers, will complete the job, flying in from conquered territory in the north. The lesson has been learnt from Pearl Harbor. The port facilities, oil storage and repair docks won't be left unscathed this time. Toshi can feel the intensity of his comrades as they sit and listen, row by row, Japanese airmen ready to die for Japan, for each other. Now he detects a change in the direction of the carrier, a feeling picked up from the acute sense of balance in his head and carried to his stomach, tightening it. The carrier is swinging round to rush into the wind, ready for takeoff. As Toshi walks out onto the flight deck with one of his two wingmen, Sansa, he looks into the sky. Few clouds, the bright blue of the tropics, and best of all, a brisk 16-knot wind. With the Akagi charging into it at full speed, there's almost 50 knots of precious headwind for takeoff. Someone behind them shouts, "Good hunting!" It's their friend Ito walking up towards them. A very short man, he's most suited to cramming into a 2-seat dive bomber with his gunner. They josh him with salutes that end up well over their heads. Ito comes back, good-natured. "Toshi, you've forgotten your parachute." A regular jest. They've been through this before. They know he doesn't take one into battle. Less weight means more time over the target, and why risk the disgrace of capture? Toshi knows that most pilots find this a bit fanatical. Everyone has their thoughts on it. "I admire your dedication," says Sansa, "but we pilots are a valuable weapon. If we can save ourselves, a float plane might be sent to rescue us." "And I need something to sit on," says Ito. "Otherwise my arse hurts." They laugh. Ito runs off to his dive bomber. 10 minutes later, Toshi sits strapped into his Zero, the engine throbbing, joining the sound of almost 50 around and behind him on the deck of the Akagi, fighters and bombers displaying the red circle of the sun on wings and fuselage. He checks his instruments. He touches his waist, feeling the belt of 1,000 stitches beneath his shirt, thinks about Sachiko and the letter she sent him, the loving wishes, the tears. It's enough thinking. He dismisses these thoughts and clears his mind for the takeoff. The flight deck is longer than 2 football pitches, but as the 18 Zeros are placed in front of the heavier bombers, these fighters have less than half the length to get into the air, with no other propulsion but the radial engine that sits in front of each pilot. Toshi has his canopy back and sees that all is ready, looks up to the bridge and sees his admiral, Nagumo, grim, his arm rising in final salute. An officer waves a flag and the increased roar of the Zeros shatters the air, drowning the "Bansais" screamed by the crewmen lining the deck. The lead Zero gathers speed down the deck, drops a little over the end, then rises to the air. After 5 more take off, it's Toshi's turn. Maximum power, chocks and breaks off, and he's racing toward the end of the deck, clawing for wind speed and lift. The end passes under his wheels and his stomach feels the plane dropping towards the sea, but only for a moment, and he's airborne, level, then climbing to join the growing formation from the other 3 carriers, nearly 200 fighters and bombers, with more land-based bombers to join them. The first element of danger is past. The launch from the carrier has been completely successful. 2 hours later, Toshi is scanning around as he always does. Lying in the sea, 2 large islands are looming up, green tropical jungle, Australian territory, but no military threat, according to their briefing. He looks down at the great fleet of bombers spread out below him at 10,000 feet. He can easily make out the commander's bomber at the head of these 188 aircraft, a sleek single-engine Kate bomber, just like at Pearl Harbor. Right now, Fuchida, in the long 3-seater greenhouse that is the Kate's cockpit, would be focused, eyes everywhere, alert to any problem, his plane loaded with radio equipment, scanners, jammers, and the transmitter that delivered the "Tora, Tora, Tora" heard in Tokyo from Pearl Harbor, the code that announced that complete surprise had been achieved. He would be listening for any radio transmissions that might warn of the attack. It's dangerous to be right in the action like this, but Toshi knows the man. This is the way Fuchida likes it. No planes have failed to make the long, slow journey here, and strict radio silence has been observed. No reconnaissance aircraft, interceptors, or coast watchers have needed to be destroyed, so far. Then, as the green islands are flowing underneath them, Toshi sees 2 Vals push over and dive towards a village. Father McGrath. On Bathurst Island, 60 miles north of the Australian mainland, Father John McGrath, missionary of the Sacred Heart, kneels in the chapel, saying to himself and to his God the divine office, a daily obligation, but one he appreciates. It's a time of no interruption, a moment for the Spirit amid all the practicalities of the mission. Out of the depths I cry to thee, Lord, hear my prayer. His thoughts pass to the statues around him, controversial but effective, incorporating the local spirit beliefs like the Birdman transformed into an angel. The local woodcarvers are fine craftsmen and ingenious enough to slip their own icons and totems past the mainland hierarchy. McGrath doesn't regard these distractions as a fault in his practice, rather an enrichment. If thou, O Lord, shouldst mark iniquities, Lord, who could stand? We're all sinners, so we'll all go together. But with you there is forgiveness. That's the comforting bit. The chapel door creaks open and a Tiwi man steps in, seeming uncertain of his next move. McGrath turns to him with questioning eyebrows. Yes, Paul? Father, many planes coming. McGrath claps his breviary shut and runs to the door. He blinks in the strong sunlight, sees many specks high in the sky to the north, hearing the sound of engines that was now reaching them. American planes on patrol sometimes flew back this way, sometimes Australian ones, but their numbers were small. Nothing he's heard has told him there's been a big increase. Paul, get everyone out, into the bush. McGrath runs to the radio shack. Paul is running away from the village houses with a dozen other Tiwi, mostly women with children, a couple of other men seeking shelter under the surrounding trees. When he has time to look up, the sky seems full of dots and white trails, regular and parallel, north to south. He sees a slight change, 2 white threads breaking off and seeming to stand still. He stops and watches steadily. The dots are growing larger by the second, and a new sound reaches him, an approaching roar. He turns back and runs toward the church. In the radio shack attached to the church, Father McGrath is at the transceiver, microphone in hand, speaking on the open frequency for Darwin Coastal Radio. Large number of aircraft overhead, identification not clear, flying southeast. Paul rushes in, no reticence now, pulls the priest from his seat and hauls him towards the door. Get away, Father, planes coming for us. What they see and hear outside are 2 planes screaming down towards them at more than 200 miles per hour. As the 2 men run away from the buildings, they hear gunfire and see bullets punching holes in the church's timber walls. Cannon shells burst nearby and they throw themselves on the ground. The 2 aircraft pull out of their dive, seemingly at ground level, banking away to circle back. McGrath, deafened by the explosions, is dragged to his feet by Paul, and the 2 men reach the shelter of the trees. The planes return to strafe, raking the buildings with more machine gun fire. McGrath thinks he should pray. Instead, he worries whether Darwin has understood his message. Darwin attacked. Toshi looks down on Darwin Harbour from 12,000 feet, a beautiful sight. The tropical depths of ocean and bay are revealed by shades of blue and green. The sandy beaches are a brilliant coral white in the sunshine. Scattered clouds drift below them. Even more beautiful is the shipping that crowds the harbour and, best of all, the absence of any defensive ground fire. This will be a complete surprise, just like Pearl Harbor. Toshi is the first to spot 5 American fighters patrolling above the airfield, the white stars standing out on their wings. He moves with his 2 wingmen into the sun. Then they dive. The profile of the aircraft becomes more familiar to him as they close in, though these aren't painted with the audacious shark's teeth seen in China. They are Curtiss P-40 Warhawks, and not to be taken lightly. Bombers and even Zeros have fallen to them at Pearl Harbor and elsewhere. But these don't seem to have spotted the danger from above, or else think their best chance is to stay in their defensive circle, each protecting another's tail. They don't have the advantage of height, and Toshi's flight will pounce on them. He sees traces streaming towards the P-40s from other Zeros. Too soon to hit them, he will wait until he's closer, but it shows him the targets they're after. He aims his Zero at another, brings the gun sight to bear on the spread of wing and cockpit, and fires the machine guns and cannons. The P-40 breaks up in a ball of flame from the exploding shells. Toshi has come so close he's almost struck with debris as he plunges down past the wreckage. He pulls back on the stick and applies full power to climb up into the melee again. Another P-40 is going down in flames. 2 of those that remain are scattering and look like being easy pickings for other flights of Zeros now joining from above. As he presses for altitude, he sees that one P-40 has come after him, perhaps feeling he now has the advantage of height. Toshi welcomes a dogfight and flies directly towards the American, sending a burst of gunfire to deflect him. Still, the P-40 keeps coming at him, guns blazing, even though Toshi can see he's scoring some hits. A good strategy, Toshi knows. Always use the advantage your plane has, and the P-40, with armour plating for the engine, is hard to bring down from front on. Both planes scream towards each other at 500 miles per hour. Toshi wonders whether the American will break off first, and to which side. Will it all end in a final blaze? At the last moment, Toshi side-slips out of the line of fire, banking away to the left, driving the Zero hard into a tight turn as the P-40 thunders past. Now he will have the tail of the enemy, a classic dogfight situation in which the Zero is unbeatable. The American has other ideas. He's put the P-40 into a steep dive. Toshi follows, sending bursts of fire, but the target is rapidly moving out of killing range. The heavy all-metal plane can dive faster than Toshi dares. He knows he will destroy his thin-skinned Zero if he tries to match that speed. They're forbidden to exceed 350 miles per hour in a dive. He fires a speculative last burst, then pulls back. Was it cowardice of the American not to fight his Zero? No. Toshi sees the plane level out in the distance and start to climb towards some of the clouds that scatter the sky. He heads in that direction, but the P-40 reaches a cloud and disappears into it. The man knows what he's doing, Toshi supposes. There might be glory in battling the mighty Zero, but now the American might have the possibility of bringing down a bomber. If he can do it before the bomb is dropped, then it's a double victory. Toshi scans the battle scene. Above him, Fuchida is leading the Kates in for their high-level bombing run. Their bombs are dropping in a broad line across Darwin town and harbour. Many Zeros still remain on patrol above. The Val dive bombers are following the Kates. Toshi rolls his fighter to see the scene below now presented above his head. The other P-40s seem to have been dealt with, 2 more destroyed, and he can see a parachute lowering into the bay. Another plane is being chased towards the airfield, where Toshi thinks he can see some aircraft on the ground, ripe for destruction. Anti-aircraft ground fire is being directed at the Japanese aircraft now, and the sky above them is starting to be smudged by the grey smoke of explosions. So far, the flak seems inaccurate. Toshi is tempted to attack the sitting ducks at the airfield, but decides they must wait. He'll watch for the P-40, which will surely attack from the clouds. He climbs above the bomber stream, sweeping the edges of the clouds. Twice he spots the American, ducking out for a quick view, repositioning, gaining height. He chases it back each time. Below, Toshi sees the wide carpet of bombs bursting. He knows the targets and the aiming seems accurate. The government house and a town block comprising the communications complex, telephone exchange and post office are hit. Then the wharves and large ships attached to them, some already belching great clouds of smoke. Perhaps an oil tanker in there. Some of the naval vessels are firing, some are even underway, manoeuvring. They will be meat for the Val dive bombers, now starting to peel off one by one. The level-bombing Kates move on, their job completed, and Toshi feels satisfied that he's helped protect them. Now come the dive bombers, a line of D-3A Vals, 2-seaters, the rear-facing gunner sitting in the cockpit behind the pilot, a 500-pound bomb slung under the fuselage. This is a squadron from his own carrier, shipmates. Ito will be in there with them. Toshi climbs 1,000 feet above this stream, scanning the clouds intently, assuming the American will strike from above the valves, but the sun flashes on metal below and the rogue P-40 emerges, heading level for the dive bomber stream. Another audacious head-on attack, guns blazing at the next valve waiting to dive. The dive bomber is crippled and starts to spin in a lazy fashion, the pilot probably dead. Toshi screams in frustration and races after the P-40. At least he will make him pay. He has his tail now. The American starts a turn to the right, not the best side for the Zero. Even so, Toshi still has the narrower turning circle. But this man is good. His turn is fast, wide and descending, not playing into the low-speed manoeuvrability of the Zero. Now the man dives as he did before, almost vertically, and Toshi realizes just how good he is. For he's going after a valve that's already into its dive towards a target ship. In fact, he's starting to catch up to it. Could that be Ito's plane? Toshi follows the American down, risking all, faster than the permitted speed, firing his machine guns, emptying his meagre rounds of cannon. No fatal hits. He feels the shuddering begin from his cloth-covered control surfaces, spreading to the thin duralumin skin, and the P-40 is getting further out of range, pouring machine gun fire into the Val, which is starting to wobble in its dive. Pieces fly off it. The rear gunner is slumped, not firing. The American then pulls out of the dive, so low he seems to be skimming the water. The forces on the pilot must be immense. The Val does not pull out, does not release its bomb. Looks like it might miss its target, but with a final wobble it crashes into the foredeck of its ship with an enormous explosion. Then the first Val crippled by the American floats past Toshi, spinning slowly, no longer a flying machine but an autumn leaf, the pilot bloody, slumped, dying, the gunner with the canopy back, hands gripping the cockpit sides, white face looking at Toshi. He recognizes him. Another Tokyo man. Toshi wonders why the gunner hasn't parachuted, but then why would he? Capture and disgrace? Torture. Death, anyway. The spinning Val drops below him, 2 streams of smoke trailing from its engine. The bomb will explode on hitting the water, obliterating 2 more shipmates. Toshi hopes that happens before the flames get worse and fry them. He wishes he'd smashed head-on into that P-40 when he had the chance, saved 4 comrades and ended everything in glory. He realizes he's soaked in sweat. This is the end of CD 1. The book continues on CD 2. CD 2. Toshi rolls the Zero and flies inverted again, looking up now to what seems a sea-green sky, the stricken Val being drawn up towards it, trailing white spirals. He watches the plane until, quite small, it pierces the fabric of this sky with a bright white starburst, which spreads outwards and then soon disappears. What lies behind this curtain? The men have perhaps found their way to rebirth in the pure land, the land free of the world's corruption. Or perhaps oblivion. Does it matter? They leave behind glory. Rolling upright once more, Toshi feels the blood steadying in his head and sets after the P-40 as it heads away to the west. At least he can keep it from coming back. He eventually figures that the man is just drawing him away from Darwin, perhaps already out of ammunition after 2 kills. Toshi gives up and returns. Flying back over the harbour, he counts 12 ships burning or sinking. Some ships have been eager to get underway, and their white wakes are painting lines and circles as they manoeuvre. One destroyer has water over its deck, yet its gun crews continue to fire at the string of valves that are destroying it. A burning tanker sends a huge cloud of smoke billowing thousands of feet into a sky that's now pocked with ack-ack fire. Oil is spilt across the bay, a huge patch of it ablaze. Swimmers dot the water. Small boats dash about to pick up survivors. As he watches, a large merchant ship at the wrecked dock blows up with a blast that he hears over the roar of his engine, a cargo of explosives probably. The ship, 6,000 tons, he remembers from the briefing, lifts out of the water, then settles again, broken-backed. Huge segments of metal debris rise high into the air and fall scattered over the bay and the town. The dive bombers are the biggest heroes here, as on so many other days. He thinks of the pilot of the Val that the P-40 had harried all the way to the water, the courage needed to continue that screaming dive, even with the plane being destroyed around him. That last swing towards the target. Was the man dead before impact, or still guiding it somehow, dutiful to the last, a man with nerve and courage? Toshi has always been glad that dive bombing was the task of others. Like Ito, good-natured butt of their jokes. Was Ito that sort of man? How to operate a dive bomber. You have the honour of having been chosen as a dive bomber pilot. A great honour indeed, because to the present time, more enemy ships have been sunk by our dive bombers than by high-level bombing, torpedo bombing, or submarines. The aircraft you will be flying is the superb Aichi D-3A. And you are in for the most dangerous, gut-wrenching ride of your life, thinks Toshi, remembering his only Val dive, not helped by sitting in the gunner's seat, facing backwards, enduring a practice run, an experience that was thought beneficial for the fighter pilots that must work with the bombers. He was probably as white-faced as the gunner whom he has just... He drives the thought from his mind by recalling the lectures, the procedures he was made to memorize, the briefings attended. The advantage you have is that you deliver your bomb from a high-speed, almost vertical dive, at close proximity to the target. In fact, virtually firing your bomb at the target like a bullet. As a result, the factors that cause a miss are minimized. Of course, there are many skills and risks that we must discuss. Many indeed. Toshi has climbed high over Darwin Harbour and positioned himself to protect another section of Vals, these from his sister ship Hiryu. He scans the sky around them as they peel off, worrying about the nearby clouds that might conceal another attacker. He still has some machine gun ammunition left, but the cannon is gone, futilely. This time, he will ram if he has to. None of these in his care will he lose. In your training, you will have received much information related to the estimation of range, deflection, wind drift, target motion, and the optimal angle of dive and release points in particular situations. It is important that you understand the release altitude, since after you have fired your bomb, you must have sufficient altitude left to pull out of the dive and save yourself and your aircraft. The speed of your dive is a great advantage to you in avoiding enemy fire and adding better penetration speed to your bomb. Pulling out of the dive places enormous strains on your aircraft and your body. Your aircraft has been engineered for this task, and you have received training in coping with the gravitational effects of your pullout. Toshi banks and scans below again. Several Vals have completed their pullout. There seems to have been more hits on sizable ships. He breathes out in relief as the last Val in the squadron moves into position to start its dive. There will usually be defensive fire from the enemy. Anti-aircraft shells are usually set to explode at a certain height, and it is very hard for enemy ground crews to compute the correct height for a rapidly diving aircraft. They may, however, score a direct hit, as may machine gun fire, particularly when directed from the ship that is your objective, as you present an unwavering target to them. Toshi watches the last Val peel off and aim downward for its most critical phase, the dive, near vertical. As gravity accelerates your descent and your engine drives you down even faster, the airframe screams. You are more than falling, held to your aircraft only by your tight harness. You can usually expect that you will be diving through a hail of enemy fire and certainly the possibility of being hit. Your duties are to deliver your bomb to the target as effectively as possible, and then to return yourself and your aircraft to the carrier, since Japan's campaign is dependent on preserving its most valuable assets, namely you and your aircraft. If, however, you receive a hit to the extent that you will be unable to execute the pullout, then your duty is much simplified. In such circumstances, stay with your bomb. Your plane, already directed at your target, can continue with its bomb to the quarry, perhaps with even greater accuracy if you are still capable of exercising some control. The loss of important assets is unfortunate, but your sacrifice will be well worthwhile. Toshi winces at the memory of the last moments of the second Val he was unable to save. Ito? He wonders whether he should dive at his maximum allowed speed behind this last one. He might be able to distract the gunners on the selected target. But why is this ship sending up no defensive fire? He soon realizes why. It's unarmed and even offering a large red cross on its deck as an excellent aiming point. It's a hospital ship, around 10,000 tons by the look of it. Toshi pulls out of his dive, feels a turning in his stomach, a sourness in his mouth. Has the pilot made a mistake? No. Toshi remembers another lesson. The Western powers have a sentimental attachment to the wounded, and by mutual agreement do not attack or defend such targets as hospital ships. Japan sees this as illogical and is no party to such agreements. Such a ship is, in fact, a factory for returning wounded men to fighting service, and is therefore a military target as much as any. Toshi cannot help but watch for the release and pull-out of this last Val, probably at about 750 feet. When you operate the bomb separation mechanism, you feel no lurch as you might in a level bomber, since the bomb has been released in a parallel dive rather than dropped. Or at least you hope so. If the bomb has failed to release, then you will be unable to level out with the additional weight, and once again your duty is simplified, so stay guiding the bomb to its target. Otherwise, if the bomb has successfully released, immediately start the pull-out. During this maneuver, you and your gunner feel the tremendous force of gravity and your aircraft strains, but all has been done correctly and you level in time. Toshi sees with mixed feelings the Val pulling out now, sees the bomb for an instant before it strikes the ship halfway between bow and bridge. Behind you, your bomb strikes the deck of the target with huge momentum and, as designed, breaks through it and explodes a short but carefully calculated moment later, by which time it has crashed through to the vulnerable lower decks and, in fact, should blow the centre of the ship apart, mortally wounding it. Toshi knows that a 500-pound bomb dropped on an airstrip can make a crater 16 feet deep and over 30 feet wide. He thinks about its effect in the bowels of a hospital ship. If you have executed all that is required diligently, the ship breaks up and sinks. You rejoin your section and squadrons for the return to your carrier, enjoying the protection of the cohesive group and the shared satisfaction of a job well done. Fruit of action. Major Floyd Pell, United States Air Force, has landed and was in the hangar briefing his ground crew on minor problems when he heard the cry, "Zero, 0, 0, on his plane's radio. By the time he'd rushed out and looked up, half his squadron, 5 P-40 Warhawks, were in battle with enemy aircraft. Nimble, undoubtedly Zeros, others loitering above the melee, and more aircraft arriving, dive bombers, a huge attack. He ran back, yelling at his crew to get his plane ready again, cursing his luck this morning. He'd led his squadron to Kopang to support the reinforcement of Timor, or tried to. Weather had defeated them and they'd had to return to Darwin Air Base. Then this, with no warning, no sirens. Outside again, he saw that the 5 P-40s he'd left as top cover were having a hard time of it, fleeing for the clouds or being shot out of the air. One might have made it into cloud, but the others were done for. When the dive bombers started their plunges towards the harbour, he saw a lone P-40 spring from the clouds, make a kill, and then chase another Val in its dive. And now he hears engines scream as the 4 P-40s that landed behind him take off again to join the battle. The Warhawk isn't the fastest climber in the world, and they're doing their best, but they're outnumbered 3-1. He can see another dozen Zeros circling high in the sky, waiting for their turn. He sees P-40s being hit, followed by flames and smoke, friends being slaughtered, and he's stuck here. The air raid alarms start to sound. Why only now? His mechanics finally have his plane ready. No time to think about the odds as he guns his Warhawk across the dry grass. Its long nose blocks his view and he can't even see where he's going until he gets enough speed to lift the tail. The plane is agonizingly slow to get into the air. He might still surprise them though, emerging from cover. When Toshi has finished guiding the dive bombers, he returns inland to the airfield. The aircraft he can see on the ground seem to have already been destroyed. 4 P-40s that have struggled into the air are being dealt with by a swarm of Zeros. Already one is in flames, another falls away, a parachute. Machine gun fire is being sent up from around the airfield, but at no great risk to him. Toshi's thinking of going down to strafe the airfield when he sees a P-40 race out of a hangar to take off from the grass. He swoops down to claim it. The American lumbers into the air, barely at flying speed, struggling to gain height. Toshi sees machine gun tracers flying up at him from the ground, but the gunners seem inexperienced, more like they were trying to train a hose on him, not allowing for the speed and angle of his curving, diving approach. Toshi makes no such mistake when the P-40, sensing his presence, commences a banked turn to the right. The machine guns on either side of him fill the cockpit with their usual din, and he sees his bullets hit their mark. Control surfaces splinter and fly off. Flames appear. As Toshi flashes past the doomed fighter, he sees it roll over. The canopy falls away and the pilot follows, dropping towards the ground from not much more than 200 feet. Toshi banks around tightly to see. A parachute is starting to stream from the falling body. How could it open in time? At the last moment it blossoms and fills with air. The airman hits the airfield hard, but unhooks the chute and starts to stagger across the open ground, probably a broken ankle. Toshi feels relief. He knows the courage it took for that man to take to the air, a true fighter pilot. This identification, this empathy brings with it a new tension, admiration for the man versus his own duty. The man scuttling like some insect towards shelter can fight again if he isn't exterminated. Toshi knows this time it would be personal. He would see this brave man die. Could he live with that thought for the rest of his days? He can see that the American might make the shelter of a slit trench, can see the soldiers there waving the man towards their shelter, even as they direct machine gun fire at Toshi's Zero, even as they try to kill him first. Then he realizes that the trained, dispassionate killer within him has ignored this internal debate, and without him really noticing it, has continued banking the Zero around to place the injured fighter pilot directly in his gun sight. There is nothing more to be considered. Toshi's finger presses the gun control, and the American's body whips and spins across the ground like a rag doll. He races past, low enough to see the contorted faces of the men in the slit trench, waving their fists at him, no doubt cursing him for killing their brave comrades so close to safety. He feels a few hits from their machine gun, but his Zero speeds on, climbing back to a safe height. Toshi continues around the airfield, sees targets he could go after, convinces himself that if he saves his remaining rounds, he'll be able to protect the Armada against any attacks on the journey back to the carrier. He'll resume his place above the bombers, now assembling for the return. When he rejoins the fleet and takes the lead of his flight, an excited Sanso tells him by hand signals that he had 1 kill. Toshi, more subdued, signals back. 2 fingers. Then he asks where Ito is, indicating him by their customary banter, the salute that lands above the head. Sanso's smile drops. He shakes his head, pointing down at the sea. Toshi returns his attention to his instruments. Does he need to feel quite so bad about killing that helpless pilot now? Does one brave man make up for another? Within the hour, Toshi has other worries on his mind. Tension is building in his stomach. He has a huge distance to cover, and his plane is sick. Its oil pressure dropping, its engine overheating and losing power, falling behind the fleet, even behind Fuchida's command bomber, bringing up the rear. As they pass back over the green islands north of Darwin, he begins to lose altitude. A Morse code question flashes from Fuchida's signal lamp. "Will you have to crash land?" Toshi waggles his wings in confirmation. After a moment, another message. "Land near the big bay. I will send a float plane." Toshi confirms again, but he's already falling away, virtually gliding, the engine rough and contributing little. He drops towards the bay, looking for a landing place, perhaps a beach, but the shoreline is ragged, heavy with mangroves. He's considering ditching in the shallow water, where the Zero would be sure to flip over, when he spots a grassy patch on a hillside. The uphill slope might compensate for its short length. Using all the skills of a carrier pilot, he guides the plane to land at the very edge of the green. If only there had been the usual arrestor wires, it would have been perfect, but he knows the plane is running too fast. He brakes hard and fishtails as the forest rushes towards him. He aims between two of the larger trees and, with a shrieking crash, both wings are ripped back. The nose ploughs the ground, then strikes another tree. His head swings forward and smashes into the gun sight. Darkness. Part 2. Captured. February 1942 to March 1942. Is now the dream? Or was long ago the dream? I wander on, lost, unable to convince myself that this is reality. Ukiyo Daibu, 1157 to 1213. The Tiwi. By the time Toshi has started to regain some of his senses after the crash, he finds himself standing on the ground, wondering how he got here, looking in confusion at his wrecked Zero. His last memory is of being on the carrier. It's some time before he's able to figure out what might have happened, to remember the possibility of rescue, some instruction about the bay that he sees below him. He reviews his injuries, sore but still in one piece, a head gash, a great nausea and dizziness, perhaps concussion or blood loss. His shirt is soaked red. By good fortune, there's been no fire. He checks the radio. Useless. A parachute might have been useful for attracting attention, since the plane is half buried in the trees. He thinks it's best to get down to the bay, but his first shaky exploration brings him to steeper land and impenetrable jungle. He toils upwards, hoping to find a better viewpoint. Perhaps the way down might be more apparent. He stops many times to rest, to vomit, to wipe blood from his eyes. He hears strange bird cries as he breaks his way through trees and vines. Would there be tribesmen here, perhaps even now watching him? Are these the islands of cannibals, poisoned arrows? He feels his pistol for reassurance. When he finally breaks through to a flat rock clearing and sees the natives, he's as surprised as they are. Dark-skinned women, half naked, one preparing a small reptile for cooking on a fire of sticks, some small children playing. He looks around for other tribesmen, sees none, and realizes from the women's wide-eyed fear that he's drawn his gun and brought it to bear on them. He tries to smile at them and puts it back in his pocket. This seems to trigger some sort of release from their shock, and the women, some grabbing the nearest child, disappear with amazing speed into the jungle. He hears the sound of their retreat fading away, then another sound, a child crying. He sees that they've left one babe behind in their haste. He's reluctant to leave the child here alone. Surely someone will return and might even be able to help him find a way to the bay. He sits near the baby, a little boy not yet walking, and offers his wristwatch to pacify him. The child stops crying, takes the watch, sucks on it, and then shakes it, finally bangs it on the ground. Toshi is looking at the boy, thinking how he and Sachiko had hoped for children, when one of the women creeps back into the clearing, perhaps the mother or the bravest of the group. He returns her nervous stare with what he hopes is a friendly attitude and beckons her to come. When she picks up the boy, she hands the watch back to him. Toshi sees a chance of cooperation and tries to communicate by gesture. Difficult to mime a bay, water. Japanese words are no use, and the English words he knows from American pop songs are no better, since what he does grasp of their meaning is hardly appropriate here. Eventually, the woman, who is trying hard to understand, seems to get the concept of water, even has that English word, which suddenly comes back to Toshi from school lessons. She beckons him, and he follows her to a couple of holes in the rock platform they're standing on. There's old rainwater in the holes. The woman takes Toshi's disappointment for ignorance or concern about the water's drinkability because she scoops up some in a cupped hand and drinks it. Toshi realizes he's thirsty and follows her example. When he stands back up, his head spins and nausea almost overcomes him. But, encouraged by his returning smatter of English, he turns again to his need, gesturing at the water holes, making large circles with his hands, some words. Big water. Where big water? Bay? Sea? Again, the woman is cooperative. She indicates a direction downhill. Toshi conveys that he wishes to be led there, and she starts off down a track, the baby wrapped in her arms. He follows, the effort bringing on greater dizziness. Suddenly, something is thrust into his back, and a man shouts some English that even Toshi recognizes. "Stick 'em up!" Instinctively, he raises his arms and reels around to face a native man who has appeared like magic from the trees. The man holds a tomahawk, handle forward, but in his other hand is a real gun, Toshi's own, lifted from his pocket. Movement and shock take Toshi's dizziness over the edge, and his legs buckle beneath him. When Toshi comes around this second time, he's quickly aware of where he is, knows he's been captured by the natives, shakes his head to clear the droning sound that fills it. Then comes a realization. The native man has been joined by two other men, and they're looking through the trees towards the sky. The droning now identifies itself as the sound of one single-engine plane. He tries to sit up to see, but the natives push him back down. He finds he doesn't have any strength to resist. The men are wiry and clad only in loincloths. They don't look like the fierce savages with bones through their noses that he was fearing. But his captor has the gun, and perhaps knows something about how to use it, as Toshi sees that the safety catch is now off. He hears the pitch of the engine lowering and knows that the aircraft is landing. It could only be a float plane, must be one sent by Fujita to rescue him, an Aichi E-13A, reconnaissance plane, launched from one of the cruisers supporting the carrier fleet. With any luck, the observer has spotted the scar his Zero left on the green clearing, has seen the wreck, and they're landing in the bay to look for him. The engine keeps ticking over, but its position isn't changing now. They're down. Pilot and observer will be scanning the area with binoculars, looking for a signal, for a body. If only they would cut the motor, they might have a chance of hearing him call. He hears a pop and sees a flare floating down. Even in the strong sunlight, it's a brilliant point of red light. When a second one is fired, he opens his mouth wide and yells. His first scream is weak in his ears, and he wonders if he's dreaming. He redoubles his efforts and produces something better, but a man shoves a hand under his chin, forcing his mouth closed. Now he can only produce strangled cries. After minutes of painful shrieking, two booms echo around the hills. The pilot will have fired his pistol in the air. They'll be waiting for some sign of life from the shore. They won't wait forever. They'll need to chase after the fleet. He hears the engine being gunned for takeoff, then the seaplane flying away from him. He's been abandoned. He knows how it will be reported. Plane crashed and destroyed in heavy forest, no survivor. Then the sound grows stronger. They're making a sweep of the shore. When he sees the plane through the trees, he screams again with the last strength left in his lungs, the last sound in his raw throat. He knows they'll never hear him over the thunder of 14 cylinders. He tries to make some signal, move any limb, but one man sits on his feet holding his knees down to the earth, and another kneels on his chest holding his shoulders down. He sees the red circles on the underside of the wings, the two long floats. Then it's gone. He stops screaming and listens to the retreating sound. The plane makes another circuit further away, seems to be approaching, but then fades. He forces his head up to listen until he can hear the sound no more, only the strange bird cries, buzzing of insects, the breathing of the natives, the breeze through the treetops. Then he slumps back down, his eyes close in despair. He is lost. The bush. With hope of rescue gone, Toshi feels body and mind going to a state of collapse. Excitement has kept him going, but now shock is taking deeper effect. For how many days he falls in and out of consciousness he will never know, but he remembers the concerned look in the first brave woman's dark eyes, improvising dressings for his head, support for small fractures. Others feed him native food, which causes cramps and diarrhea at first, but his strength starts to return and his mind clears. His depression remains, but that too improves with a return to physical exercise as he and the islanders start walking on. By this time, the women have departed, and his only companions are a couple of men and a teenage boy, led by the tomahawk man who captured him. This man tells him his name is Matthias Ulungura. Toshi gives a false name, Asahikawa, the first of several. He also gradually removes any papers he has on him and manages to destroy them in their campfires. He picks away at the insignia on his uniform and drops them along the way. Once he becomes accustomed to the sound and rhythm of their voices, Toshi realizes that their English is completely fluent, unlike his own elementary grasp. They even tried to give him some language practice, naming things in English and occasionally in their own native language, Tiwi they call it, though they seem to use that same name for themselves and their land. Toshi gives some thought to escape, but the bush, as they call the jungle here, is its own jailer, and he can only admire how Matthias finds the way. Toshi himself would be lost and unable to find food. Also, most of the creatures here seem to be venomous, dangerous, as the Tiwi cheerfully warn him. In any case, Matthias has the gun and looks like he could use it. He tries it out once, dropping a small kangaroo-like creature with one shot, perhaps to reassure himself that he knows its workings, or more likely to prove his skill and intent to Toshi. At night, they appear to take shifts sleeping, although Matthias seems never to be completely unwatchful. Toshi can feel his flying boots coming apart as they walk many miles over the next 2 days. His clothes are frayed by the thick bushes they often have to press through, his skin torn too, and then blackened by areas of bush that have been burnt. He stinks of sweat and forest grime. The Tiwi, they seem to pass through the bush without any discomfort, placing their bare feet with care and no slackening of pace. Their mostly unclad skin seems to shed any dirt, seems never to sweat, their hair remains glossy and clean. In the flattish open forest are many small brooks that must be waded through or stepped over, meandering, merging into fuller rivulets. It's been a rainy season, they tell him. His flying boots are treacherous for stepping on river stones. Once, crossing a narrow cleft where the streams have drawn together to tumble down through vines, he slips on a mossy boulder that has split the water. Matthias, unshod and sure-footed, steadies him. Toshi is impressed by the Tiwi's ability to live off the land. It seems the island has everything they need for a simple life. They always kill something just before they need it, and they're often gathering nuts and berries, the occasional small plum or apple. Sometimes they'll stop to find grubs hidden under bark. Once, when they're resting on a log, Matthias motions the others to be quiet and points to a nearby eucalyptus tree. A reptile about 1 metre long is clinging by 4 clawed limbs to the tree trunk, on the side away from them and at about head height, just in sight enough to keep an eye on them, ready to run further up the tree if necessary. The boy becomes excited. "Watch, I'll show you how to catch a goanna." Matthias smiles as the boy creeps away, moving slowly until he's at the side of the tree where the goanna can't see him. The reptile seems unaware of the threat and remains motionless. The boy slides his hand, blind, around the other side of the trunk, grabs the animal by the tail, and reefs it off the tree. The goanna reacts with wild rage, twisting and arching, trying to get at its captor, but the boy's two-handed grip on the tail holds it safely. He trots over to the others, holding out the beast, its body gyrating, its savage teeth and claws in their faces. Toshi jumps and stumbles back off the log. The men laugh and pull him back up. The boy enjoys this teasing for a while, then returns to the tree and sets the goanna down, still holding the tail. The creature seems calmer, with its claws to the ground. "Now I let go of the tail. Watch him run back up the tree." He releases the tail, but the goanna spins around and goes for its tormentor. The boy whoops in surprise, turns and runs across the clearing, a high-stepping run as if to keep as much of himself in the air as possible. The goanna chases him, making good speed on its short legs. The men roar with laughter. The goanna, honour satisfied, strides with some dignity off into the bush. The boy falls to the ground, laughing. "That fella was sure pissed off with me." Matthias is doubled up, laughing too, and Toshi finds himself joining in, laughing as he has not done for so long. Caught up in this sudden feeling of happiness, he's also mindful of a thought intruding, that this laughter is unsuited to his situation, to the sense of dishonour he should feel, to his shame. Toshi examines this thought. The brief span of the sunny present is edged with the colours of the past and future, bloody and dark, empty of love without Sachiko. Is there a life in this present? A fantastic notion arises of a life abandoned to the wilderness, to live as these natives do, dependent on nothing but the land, remote from all the turmoil of war, the old future obliterated. If he considers that fantasy in any way possible, his illusions are dashed when the track finally breaks out of the bush to the sea, and he realises how misplaced was his conception of these tiwi. Before entering a tiny fishing settlement here, his tiwi captors pull out clothes from their sacks and dress themselves in cotton work pants and shirts. They put on sandals too. The handful of locals, similarly dressed, greet them with excitement and stare at Toshi in wonder. Here is order, organisation, a feeling of industry that Toshi had not imagined. There will be no wilderness untouched by this world war. Amid the hubbub, mostly in Tiwi, Toshi discerns an animated retelling of his capture, the tomahawk in the back, the hands raised. When he hears jokes about Hopalong Cassidy, he realises that these Tiwi are as familiar with American westerns as he is. The gun is examined with great interest. Matthias appears to take their congratulations with humble pleasure, then falls into serious discussion with some older men. It seems that some decision is made. A small fishing boat is readied, and Matthias and Toshi climb aboard, with two other men who take the oars. They head out to open water. Toshi can see they're crossing a narrow strait. Bathurst, Matthias names the land they are approaching. After the humidity of the track, the wind that stirs the surface of the water is a relief, carrying the fragrance that has become familiar to him, the astringent eucalyptus, and the smell of the rainforest that reminds him of his father's garden shed. The name Bathurst reminds Toshi of something from his battle briefing. An airstrip there, probably a military presence. His options are running out. He should have abandoned himself to the wild when he had the chance. He has been deceived by curiosity and vague hope. Now all he can do is throw himself to the large saltwater crocodiles that have been pointed out to him, or hope to drown in the deep blue eddying strait. Little chance. The two islanders rowing have heavy clubs beside them, and Matthias sits opposite, never taking his eyes off him, a hand close to the gun. Toshi asks for the 10th time where they are taking him, and this time Matthias seems to think he deserves to know. "There are soldiers on Bathurst. We will give you to them." That will do it. After the carnage of Darwin, they will surely execute him. He almost feels a sense of relief. "They kill me," he says. Matthias interprets this as despair and is concerned, smiles at him. "No, no. You are a prisoner of war. They will keep you, look after you." This is not what the warrior within wants to hear. This is shame. Matthias's smile fades when he sees the real despair in Toshi's eyes, somehow understanding what it is to be held under someone else's power. Sergeant Sam Boland. Sam Boland, Royal Australian Engineers, lights a fuse with the end of his cigarette and jumps into his jeep. He's shirtless, tin-hatted, dirty and sweaty from the tropical heat, but pretty pleased that the engine starts first go and he won't have to run like buggery to beat the blast. He guns the jeep away and hasn't got into top gear before a huge boom behind him lifts tons of dirt into the sky. Only a few pebbles reach him, and he lets out a whoop, as he always does, and pulls up at the next spot. He jumps out and throws his tools on the ground. Behind him, levelled ground is marked by a staggered row of craters. The only military presence left in the Tiwi Islands, Sam is doing his bit for the Allied cause. This airstrip has to be made unusable. The enemy is coming, that's obvious. He already has one tucked away in his shack, and they could land on this short airstrip. They could also lengthen it for their operations against the mainland. He finishes his cigarette and grinds the butt into the dry earth. He grabs a pickaxe and swings it high and then down to peck a hole through the packed surface. When he can't go any lower through the dirt, he switches to the heavy crowbar, and when he's done enough with that, he rests and takes his next cigarette from his pocket. Would have been more fun if Darwin had sent a bomber or two to mess up the strip, but he knows how scarce resources are. Maybe half a dozen bombers there, a handful of Yankee fighters, some old Wirraways, not much else. Or whatever's left of them now. This strip can't be defended, only spoiled. At least he's improving his suntan. He wonders what Darwin will look like when he sees it again. The rest of his mob has skedaddled back there to do what they can, and he'll be there too in a few more days, along with his prisoner. He takes another look at the Jap's pistol. It hasn't left Sam's belt since the surprise present from the Tiwis. Maybe he can keep the gun as a souvenir. Unlikely. Someone will overrule him. He goes to the jeep for another charge of dynamite. In the shack beside the airstrip, Toshi listens, trying to understand what the sergeant is doing. The urgent accelerations of the jeep, the booms. Excavation? Demolition? A most industrious man, this Boland. He had quickly improvised this cell while the natives had kept guard, hammering planks across the window and door. Toshi paces around and examines his surrounding one more time. A bunk room for 6 men, vacated. A supply of water and biscuits. A first aid kit that had been useful for redressing his head wound. A pile of abandoned Australian Air Force clothing that Toshi has helped himself to, hiding his stinking flight uniform under a bunk. The sergeant seems to be the only person here, now that the natives are gone. Matthias had shaken his hand and wished him good luck, Toshi giving the Tiwi a formal bow in return. Through his barred window, he can see the bush at the edge of the clearing and, nearby, a small shed of wood and corrugated iron. His barred door opens onto a screened veranda where Boland has set up a camp bed for himself. The planks across the door could probably be knocked off, but the noise would attract attention, and the sergeant has the gun. Anyway, where would he go? No aircraft he could steal here. Perhaps there's a radio and he could call for rescue, but does he have that right? A downed pilot is one thing. One that's allowed himself to be captured is quite another. Shameful, best ignored. There would be no rescue now. As the sun lowers, Toshi hears the jeep returning. Through the window, he observes Boland offloading equipment and cartons, presumably explosives, and storing them in the small shed, securing it with chain and padlock. The Australian soon appears on the veranda and greets him with a wave and a grin. Toshi responds only with the appropriate stern, unwavering stare. After rattling around in storage crates, the man produces tinned meat and biscuits, passes some through to him, then settles down with a bottle of beer to enjoy the same dinner. He looks at Toshi's sour face, then gets up again and returns with another bottle. "There you are, sunshine." Toshi accepts it and sits on a bunk to eat. The food is military quality, the beer is strong and warm, but it goes down well enough. Boland attempts some shouted conversation, pointing to his head, probably inquiring whether he's feeling well. Toshi nods okay, without attempting any speech. After his meal, Toshi goes to the window to breathe in some of the cooler evening air. It's dark now apart from Boland's lamp. Through the lingering odour of explosive and kerosene, he thinks he can smell the scent of the sea in the breeze blowing towards him, but he can hear no sound of waves, just wind in the trees and night birds. He steadies his breath, seeking a calm centre in his predicament. A series of ugly, ear-splitting sounds brings him back to the door. Boland is relaxing by practising on a bugle, murdering, rather than practising, some piece that only the tone-deaf could stand. The notes seem to give little clue, but after interminable repetitions, Toshi begins to recognise a certain rhythmical pattern. Could it be the popular American song that was playing in Tokyo before things went wrong with the USA? The Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy? The idiot is unaware that, despite the title, the tune cannot be played on a bugle. The unvalved instrument simply doesn't have all the notes. The man continues in his ignorance. What notes the bugle does possess are being abused now, and even Boland seems to be feeling some frustration with his performance. He sees Toshi's pained face at the door. "This is jazz, mate, not your sort of music." He tries again, and Toshi shows more pain, hands over ears. Boland gives up and passes the instrument through the bars. "Okay, sunshine, let's see you do better." Toshi takes the bugle and thinks about it. He wipes the mouthpiece with the tail of his shirt, puts it to his lips, and launches into a swinging version of Bugle Call Rag, which can be played on the bugle, or at least the opening of it, which is all he's going to play. He stops to enjoy the surprise on Boland's face and can't help grinning. Boland, with some grumpy muttering, goes back to his beer. "Well, at least I got a smile out of you, smartass." He takes out his cigarettes, lights one for himself, and passes the packet through the bars to the prisoner. 2 days later, the sergeant is still beavering back and forth with his explosives. In the bunk room, Toshi prowls around smoking Boland's cigarettes. He's had more time to consider possibilities. His upbringing and training demand that he should take some action against the enemy without regard for his own life. There might be a way of doing harm to Boland, who has become more relaxed with his captive. Feign a collapse, perhaps, then seize the gun, kill the man, escape. No. In his heart he knows how difficult it would be to kill Boland now, no longer the impersonal other, but someone he knows by name, has shared food with, drink, a joke. And the question remains, where would he escape to? He convinces himself that Boland's death would make no difference in this backwater of war. Perhaps the time has come for his postponed suicide. He looks at the pile of Air Force clothing, the handful of belts there. He could hang himself. But it seems tawdry and wasteful to abandon his remaining dreams of a future, even of a future with Sachiko, no matter how delusional, without some impact on the enemy. He goes to the window and thinks about the shed, the explosives that must be in there. The ground between him and the shed is covered in low, dry spinifex, and he recalls that the Tiwi had told him something about burning this down when it was dry, for hunting. Here it looks dry enough to burn, and he has the matches that Boland's left him. Yes, this is a way. He closes his eyes and prepares himself for action. For death. He starts flicking lighted matches through the window towards the shed. Many go out, and others fail to ignite anything. He perseveres. With half the box gone and already starting to think of other plans, he sees a small clump burning, catching other clumps, spreading, more smoke than flame at first, between his hut and the shed. Too close to his hut. There's plenty of smoke and a good blaze going when he hears the jeep screaming back, sees the Australian run ahead of the flames with his shovel to defend the little shed. The man digs furiously into the hard ground, throwing the dirt back onto the edge of the fire, moving along the fire break he's trying to make, coughing and choking on the swirling smoke, racing back to smother spot fires that have leapt the break. He's being forced back towards the shed, too many spots to cover, and now the fire's moving around the sides of the shed. Toshi can see it's a hopeless task. He can also see that the flames have reached his own prison and the dried timbers have caught fire. He would have preferred to be blown up rather than burnt to death, but beggars can't be choosers. With enough smoke in the room now, he has a good chance of being asphyxiated before he's burnt alive. He draws in the acrid smoke, his windpipe burning, feels himself dropping to the floor. Someone seems to be ripping at the nailed planks across the doorway. He loses consciousness. Then he's being dragged across the floor of the shed by one leg, the rest of the planks at the door being kicked away. He's outside, sucking in air. Boland gets a shoulder under one armpit and hauls him to his feet. "Run! Run, you mug!" Like partners in a three-legged race, they stagger away. Toshi speeding up as full consciousness returns, with fear close behind. The flames leap into the shed. Then he's stunned by a mighty explosion, lifted and propelled through the air by a great force before being slammed to the dirt. Toshi sits in the jeep being driven by the Australian along a rough road, little more than 2 tyre tracks winding through the bush. His rescuer already seems to be regretting his heroism. He wrenches the jeep through its gears, rips it around bends, careless of overhanging branches, then glares at him. While Boland was cursing and loading up with what items he could salvage from the destruction, Toshi had made sense of what was going on here. An obvious retreat from this airfield, a competent job of destroying its immediate usefulness, a scorched earth action to which he himself has now contributed. Toshi wonders how it was that he'd chosen life. The smoke and then fear had dazed him and he'd run with the Australian. When the explosion threw them to the ground and the eruption of dirt and wreckage descended on them, he did not want to die. He wanted them both to survive, and somehow they had. They've travelled some distance along the bush track before the Australian breaks the silence. "Anyway, sport, you done me a favour. I had to blow that whole bloody lot up today." Toshi stares at him. He can't make much sense of this. The man looks at him, takes his hand off the wheel and mimes the explosion. Boom! Toshi mimics the actions and the word. Something, the miracle of being alive perhaps, the childish absurdity of this dumb show, triggers his sense of humour. He chuckles. Boland stares at him, shakes his head, and then can't help having a laugh himself. "You mad bugger." His laugh dies suddenly though, and Toshi sees that something has caught his attention. The road leads through a fairly open area here, and 50 yards ahead is a vehicle, a truck. Military khaki. Boland halts the jeep. Then he drives slowly forward, confusion and concern on his face. When they're close to the truck, Toshi sees that its rear, towards them, is marked by many bullet holes. The canvas covers are torn through. Boland gets out and moves carefully over to it, one hand on the gun at his belt. He pulls the canvas aside to look in. Toshi hears a deep, agonised groan. Boland stands there a moment longer, then takes the gun out and strides towards Toshi, seizes him by the neck and hauls him from the jeep. "Come and see what you've done, you fucking bastards!" Toshi is dragged towards the truck with the gun at his temple and his head is thrust through the canvas. He recoils at the stench of death. Inside are 4, perhaps 5 bodies. Australian soldiers, perhaps some natives, it's hard to tell, the destruction is so complete. And not just from the bullets. The bodies are being destroyed by the flesh-eating creatures of the jungle, rats or whatever. Insects swarm on some bare body parts. This is the part of glorious war he never saw from his Zero. He vomits into the mess. Boland smashes him in the face with the gun, knees him in the groin and kicks him to the ground. He goes to the jeep and comes back with the pickaxe. Toshi lies on the ground, looking up at the heavy metal point that the Australian has raised high above his head. In that moment, he can visualise what has happened here. The pilots that destroyed the radio station, missing out on the glory of Darwin Harbour, must have searched out any military target of opportunity. There was precious little on these islands, but the green canvassed truck, while not a warship, has afforded them easy target practice, and they've emptied their magazines here before returning to the carrier. He might have often done the same, but now he's finally seen the effects of this work. Self-disgust wells up like the vomit in his mouth. He is ready for his fate. Boland brings the pickaxe down with all his might. Toshi closes his eyes and holds still for the blow. He hears the crunch and wonders why there is no pain in death. He opens his eyes and sees that Boland has struck the earth beside his head, has raised the pickaxe again, his face full of anger, hatred. Again the blow comes down beside his head. Again and again. Toshi is tortured by the delay. Is this the intention? It goes on and on. Boland is gasping, becoming exhausted, out of control with the effort he's putting into each blow. Eventually, he slows and stops, leaning on the handle. Then he weeps. Toshi finally understands. The Australian is burying his friends. He sits up slowly, then rises and walks to the jeep. He returns with a shovel and starts to dig out the earth that Boland has broken up. The sun is lowering into the trees by the time they've buried the bodies and marked the graves with rough posts bound together with lengths of vine, improvised Christian crosses. Toshi stares at their work. Some religious formality seems befitting, but Toshi doubts the sergeant has any more appropriate prayers than he would. He watches the man go through the gear in the jeep and draw out the bugle, now battered and scorched. A military farewell call does seem appropriate, and Toshi prepares for another assault on his ears. Instead, the Australian holds the instrument out to him. "The last post?" Boland hums a few notes. Toshi shakes his head. He'd learnt the calls in his stint in signals, recognises that as one he'd played from the book, but can't remember the notes. He knows the British use it, but the Japanese, the Americans and others, they use another, simpler but equally moving in context. "Taps." Boland nods. Taps it is." They come to attention. Toshi brings the bugle to his lips, breathes deeply, ignoring the raging pain in his windpipe from the fire, makes himself become the instrument. The sad notes flow over the rough graves and on through the bush. The intelligence officer. Flight Lieutenant Bradley is thinking he can't go much further when they break out of the heavy bush and he sees the open green upland swamp, the big gash that showed up on reconnaissance, and there, at the end of it, half buried in the scrub, the Zero that the Tiwi had reported. Mitsubishi A6M0, red discs on wings and side, partly wrecked but unburnt, the first of the legendary fighters to fall on Allied soil, moderately intact. If Australia can hang on to these islands, hold Darwin, then other intelligence officers will come and dig the wreck out, take it south for analysis, but for now, Bradley is it. "Do what you can," he was told. The climb up here from the bay with his two privates nearly killed him, the massive Bates hacking a path with a machete, and Sweeney, the little twerp, bitching and not much help, except for an occasional hand up. Somehow, here they are. He limps to the plane. Both wings have been ripped off as it plunged into the trees, giving him the first of many insights, for the wing stubs seem to have been built as part of the fuselage rather than separately made and bolted on. A sense of craft rather than mass production. The cockpit is open, and the expected body of the pilot is not there. Some blood on the gun sight. Maybe he was picked up by the float plane that was seen hereabouts. Just in case, Bradley sends the 2 privates to search around. Maybe there's an injured man here, or more likely a corpse after this time. He hears the 2 crashing off through the scrub for a while, followed by silence, either out of earshot or sitting down. Small birds resume their chatter in the trees, and Bradley sits too, rubbing his ankle, the good one. No use rubbing the one that hurts like blazes, it's just a piece of nicely shaped timber. Timber with pain buried in it. He unwraps a Vincent's APC powder and takes it with a swig of whiskey from a pocket flask. Bradley concentrates on the plane. A lot to learn here. He pulls himself to his feet and takes photographs, noting everything that might be useful. A tail hook so it's carrier-based, the Japanese the first to create a carrier fighter that could match it with the very best. He puzzles over some of the markings, but manages to make sense of some of them using his recently acquired Japanese. Anything loose from the cockpit is worth gathering. Some operating manuals, maps, and notebooks. He studies the maps. They certainly knew the disposition of ships in the harbour, the layout of the airfield, oil tanks. Most of the labels and signs he can understand, as much from knowing aircraft and how pilots work as knowing the language. In the wings, 2 20mm Oerlikon cannon made under licence from the Swiss company. 2 5.5mm machine guns firing through the propeller, licence-built British Vickers design, the working ends jutting into the cockpit. Handy for unjamming them if you ever got the time. 3-bladed prop, constant speed, under licence from Hamilton Standard USA. He wonders, would they still be paying the royalties on all these licences? Quite possibly. Mitsubishi and all the other armament companies have their standards, their business ethics, and whatever way wars end, companies survive. They're not human. They have to be able to keep doing business with each other based on reputation and trust. What a world. It disgusts him. He examines the wings ripped off by the crash. Thousands of rivets, each recessed for aerodynamic smoothness. Again, a craft approach, more than crude mass production. No self-sealing fuel tanks, nor is there armour plating behind the pilot. Bradley himself had certainly been saved by these protections over England in his Spitfire, almost as beautiful as this superb plane, but more durable by the look of it. Perhaps the Japanese aren't worried about attrition. Plenty of pilots and planes. The skin on this plane is amazingly thin, a new sort of duralumin perhaps. Cloth-skinned control surfaces. Many interior frames and spars are drilled out to reduce weight. Everything cut back, simple, light. No wonder it's so fast, so nimble, though easy to bring down. That's if you could ever get a bead on it. No parachute. Surely they haven't done away with that. But you never know with the Japanese. Perhaps the pilot had taken it with him for shelter or to attract his rescuers. Bradley calls a few cooeys to bring his men in from their search. By the time they wander back from the bush, he's down on one knee with his head in the engine compartment, calipers in hand. Oil everywhere. One bullet, caliber .303, has penetrated enough to cause the leak. As there's no other bullet or flak damage, this one was obviously the cause of the crash landing. He puts up an oily hand for a help up. Bates obliges. Bradley tells them, "A .303. One was all it took." Sweeney whistles. "Oh, what a shot! One bloke with the old .303. Here he mimes a single-shot bolt-action rifle. "And he scores this beauty." Bradley smiles at the lovely simplicity of that story. Japan's finest plane brought down by a lone rifleman firing one shot from the old .303. The favourite old rifle, he reminisces for a moment. We shot it at cans, rabbits, traffic signs and the occasional roo. Learnt to use it in the school cadets. Fancy one bloke getting such a good shot in. A great story. Should be true. Bradley knows it's a beautiful lie. He's seen the line of holes stitched across the broken engine cowling. Machine gun, probably a Vickers. When he was crouching in the slit trenches behind HQ and the Japanese single engines were strafing everything on the airfield, machine gunners on the ground were throwing up a ton of lead. .303 was the caliber of the bullet those Vickers guns fired, not the name of the rifle. Crouching in that trench with all that going on, how he wished he was up in the air, with a decent plane and a fighting chance, of course. He tells his men what they should remove to be carried back. Some instruments, the gun sight, reflective design, not gyroscopic, a few of the smaller engine parts, carburettor. While the two work, Bates doing the heavy lifting and Sweeney as ever talking rubbish, Bradley sits against a tree stretching his shortened leg, wondering how there can be this much pain inside a missing limb. Strange. He swigs from his water canteen this time and sends down another powder. He was no tin legs barter, multiple ace, flying on with 2 artificial legs. Bradley had scored a few kills himself, but losing half a leg, they said that was the end of his flying. Back home in Australia, looking at being pensioned out, the intelligence job came along. Something useful with Japan looming. Looking at this superb plane, even spread out like this, a longing for the sky returns. He wonders, how did the pilot get it down here? Carrier skills, a nice piece of flying. He'd like to meet the man, if he survived. Interrogation. Imprisoned in a room of the shed that serves as hospital for these islands, Toshi feels recovered physically, but something tells him there's an advantage in clinging to the pretense of weakness. Perhaps it's fear of the journey that will take him to the mainland, perhaps into public view as a trophy prisoner. He remembers the only man captured from the midget submarines at Pearl Harbor, unconscious, but Yamamoto acted as if the great victory was nothing in the face of American boasts that they held this one man. Now, Toshi finds himself at the same risk of public disgrace. He looks at the menacing figure of his guard, Private Bates he's called, sitting always in this room, a huge man with a heavy, dark brow above an ugly stare that hints at what he'd like to do to a captive Japanese. He makes sure nothing goes near Toshi that he could harm himself with or use as a weapon. Otherwise, the room is pleasant enough, with bright daylight streaming through the veranda window. The smell of the sea and the tropical bush reach him here, even through the fug of Bates's continual cigarettes. He's thinking he'd really enjoy a smoke himself when the officer, a Lieutenant Bradley, walks in with the doctor. Well, they call him Doctor, but he seems to be as much a religious figure around here. A white man in long white garb, he acts scientifically enough, checking the scar on his forehead, shining lights in his eyes, hitting knees and so on, murmuring opinions to the officer before he leaves. "Brother thinks you will be ready to travel soon." Bradley says this in barely competent Japanese. He follows it up by asking if Toshi would like a cigarette, a welcome question, but unknowingly expressed in a level a toilet keeper might offer. Toshi bows and takes the cigarette. "Dozo." "Do itashimashite." The man seems pleased with his effort, but now the "don't mention it" sounds like it's bestowed by a member of the Emperor's court. Toshi sucks on the cigarette to suppress his smile. Perhaps nobody should attempt Japanese unless they have been born to the subtleties of the language. Will his efforts at English be just as fraught? Perhaps not, as the Australians seem to show no great formality or even much respect for each other. Bates has not risen or given a salute for the officer. Perhaps he commands no respect. Bradley continues talking pleasantly, inquiring about his well-being, the food he's getting, telling him they'll fix him up with some clothes, and was there anything else he needed? The Australian has the rudiments of grammar and a reasonable vocabulary, but this amusing lack of subtlety, Toshi is acclimatizing his ear to the bizarre changes of level. "Perhaps something for writing, please, if that is permitted." "Of course," Bradley answers. "Letters to home. That can be arranged." Toshi is surprised by this, replies quickly, "No, I would like to learn more of your language, keep note of the words I learn, the ones I need to know." "Good man. I'll get you a notebook." Toshi takes note of the wings on Bradley's jacket. A pilot, but perhaps not a successful one, judging by the obviously false leg, not from combat at this stage of Australia's experience, he presumes. He does feel some sympathy for the man, barred from flight like himself, reduced to looking after prisoners and their paperwork, a duty given to the lowest. Now the officer raises that issue, patting his pockets. The forms. We should fill out the details, identification, name, rank, and so on. It's important that your people back home know. Toshi can't believe his ears. The man must see that he's confused because he elaborates. You know, that you're safe and well? He makes it sound like a question. Toshi has no trouble pretending that he's too unwell yet. He really does feel sick in the stomach. Bradley nods. I'll let you have a rest. Come back this afternoon. But what should I call you? Minami. Until this point, Toshi has concealed his real name. He'd given a difficult and unphonetic name to the natives and another to Sergeant Boland. The Tiwi called him Mr. instead, which seemed suitably formal on the face of it, but in the circumstances was probably cheeky. Boland called him mate or sport, which he has since noted are in common use between men, and sometimes sunshine, which seemed attractive, but he suspects there was ironic humour in it. He realises a false name and persona are now required. He has no intention of giving the real name of the second ever Japanese captive, no intention of pouring his own shame over his family, over Sachiko. They would be ostracised, and in their close-knit community that was as bad as a death sentence. He's already given it some thought and invented a new name, Minami Tadeo. He knows nobody of that name. Minami needs a persona of his own as well, a role in the military. When he had not felt so lucid, he had given some indication at the airstrip to Sergeant Boland, mainly by mime, of the way he'd come to Earth. That was a start. He wonders how much he should keep and how much he should change from his true identity to protect the honour of that man who, being dead, should be one of the honourable dead, should be quietly forgotten with due respect, prevented from lingering as a hungry ghost with mouth too small for its insatiable belly. Toshi knows that, as time goes on, he will find that the ghost is not easily forgotten. Sad memories of that earlier life will still arise, and he will not completely convince his mind that they are the belongings of another, like a deceased relative. They will still always be part of him. He will never completely bring off the illusion. For now, it's a practical exercise in deception. He must think through the mind of this substitute that he is to become, this gunner from a bomber, lowly ranked, unimportant to Allied intelligence, someone they can quickly dispense with. He feels he is strong enough to prevent the truth being ripped from him by force, fears more a carelessness on his part, the failure of memory in the liar, the small inconsistencies. He will be on his guard. Over his lunch, Bradley thinks about the coming interview. He prefers that word to interrogation. He's learnt plenty from Sergeant Boland and Matthias Ulungara. Boland has briefed him on the man's character. Unpredictable, intelligent, unafraid of death. Bradley noted that the two had parted with a stiff camaraderie. Matthias seemed to have a sympathetic attitude towards him too. There was something to work on there, a capacity for friendship. He's heard what the sergeant had been able to make out of the airman's story. The gunner on a Val dive bomber didn't like the idea of fighting in the war, bailed out over the islands. Cock and bull. Then there's the man's identity. Gave different names to Boland and the islanders, another one to him today. Why? Some puzzling aspect of the Japanese mentality? Why a gunner when he's more likely to be the Zero pilot, judging by the place where the Tiwi captured him? Does he fear worse treatment from us as an officer? A specialist on the fighter plane everyone wants to know about? Maybe putting Bates in his room put the fear of God up him. Anyway, his identity is not the big issue right now. When the Australian lieutenant returns, Toshi accepts the cigarette and light he's offered, draws deeply but tries not to relax too much as the officer starts to question him about how he came to bail out. The sergeant had trouble understanding you, so I think he might have the story wrong. I mean, you jump out of a cockpit like that, you're likely to be swept into the tailplane. We were taught to invert the plane, then you just fall out. Toshi has built a more plausible story. The pilot rolled the plane over. I unbuckled and dropped out. The lieutenant looks puzzled. I would have thought the pilot would shoot you with his pistol, not help you abandon your post. No, he ordered me to bail out. Toshi sees the Australian's head go back in surprise. He explains, "We were returning and it looked like we had maybe not enough fuel to reach the carrier. I was sacrificed to save the pilot and plane." Sacrificed? What about you? Gunners are easily replaced. Plenty of gunners. Not so many pilots, not so many planes. They must be conserved. The man nods as if he understands this fact of war. There was a float plane spotted later. Sent for you? No, not for a gunner. Maybe for a pilot down somewhere? The Australian pauses and starts unfolding the official forms in his hand. He looks up at Toshi. It seems a terrible thing to ask of you. We Japanese are proud to sacrifice ourselves for the good of all. I'm impressed, but surely there was another way. You could have been dropped near one of the closer ships. There were none closer. They were with the carriers. The man fingers the forms. Couldn't they have sailed further south, saved you, maybe saved other planes? No, the fleet was already heading north. Well, that all makes sense to me. He rests the forms on his lap and takes out his pen. Gunner, rank flight sergeant. What was the name again? Toshi feels tension lifting as the lieutenant starts filling out the details. Bradley asks his religion, suggesting options: Taoist, Shinto, Buddhist, and so on. Toshi remembers that Christians have a belief in having only one belief, while his countrymen felt free to pick and choose whatever practices suited. Shinto for births, Buddhism for death. He opts for Buddhist. The officer comes back to the name, Minami Tadeo, and fusses about which is the family name. Minami, Toshi confirms, shows him how he spelt it, speaks it a number of times to confirm the pronunciation. Hearing it from Bradley's lips, it takes on a reality. It becomes official. Seeing it on the form, Toshi feels a huge burden lifted, as if something of a new life is being born, a rebirth. To a lower level, yes, but that is appropriate for the shame of his capture. He finds himself feeling gratitude to his captor, respect and compassion too. Respect for the wings and service ribbons on his tunic. Compassion for the false leg, a man reduced to filling out forms, minding prisoners. A fallen eagle like himself. Prisoner and jailer, two lowly stations. Although this Bradley seems cheerful enough with his work as he folds his forms away. So the fleet heads north. Thank heavens. No more bombing for Darwin. Toshi sighs. Unfortunately, there will still be more from the land-based bombers. He has spoken quickly out of sympathy for the Australians' naive hopes, but he notes that the man's smile does not fade as much as he would have thought it might. Toshi has a sense of unease. Perhaps this newborn is still too trusting, too forgetful of duty. This is the end of CD2. The book continues on CD3. CD3. Stella Maris. Bradley lays his leg along the bench seat and looks at the white wake of the Stella Maris stretching back across blue water. The green islands are falling back over the horizon. Gulls chase the mission's 25-footer, diving into the foam. The lieutenant breathes in the fresh open air, feels the sun on his bare head. His prisoner, Minami, or whoever, is inside the covered section with the two privates. Better in there, less likely to jump overboard, which would be an inconvenience. As the boat chugs towards Darwin, Bradley wonders what the port will be like now. Surely better than when he left. The airfield has a strip back in action, he's heard, and some more fighters have arrived. Good work, considering the pasting the second attack had given the base. 2 hours after the first attack had cleared sky and ground of Allied fighters, the twin-engined land-based bombers had done more damage to the airfield. Almost every building was destroyed, the airstrips cratered, the huge blast of an ammunition dump. He had crouched, trembling in the slit trench, with clusters of explosions booming in his chest, at least alive for the moment. The Japanese hadn't had it all their own way. 3, possibly 4 downed. That was his job. Check out what had come down. He had gone to the bay to see if anything had washed up from the Val dive bombers that were reported as crashed. On the beach, he saw sights he would never forget. Soldiers digging graves in the sandhills, bodies and body parts laid out for identification. Sailors, wharf labourers and merchant seamen, oil-soaked, bloody, some burnt beyond recognition as humans. The wharfies and many others could have lived if the warnings had been heeded, the siren sounded, 20 precious minutes to take cover. His mob had dropped the ball there. When Father McGrath's message had come through, the duty officers decided all he'd seen was the flight of 10 American P-40s returning from the north. No alarms. How much guilt should he bear for this? As well, there was wreckage, things that could float mostly, and huge pieces of the cargo ship Neptuna exploded with a load of ammunition. He knew the latest count. Of 47 ships in the harbour, 8 were sunk and 15 damaged. On the beach, he could see no wreckage of enemy aircraft, nor bodies identifiable as Japanese. He walked along the sand, unconsciously counting the bodies, but stopping after 100. There were perhaps as many more along the beach, and plenty being brought in by launches. He talked his way onto one of those boats in the faint hope of finding something of the Vals, but there was only more of the same. Then came the news of the Zero crashing on Melville Island. That was a prize. He sought resources and permissions from the minimum number of people and was off, glad to get out of the chaos, even if it meant heading north towards the enemy rather than south, which is what everyone else was doing. Most were trying to get to the railhead at Adelaide River in the hope of a trip further down to safety. Not just the excusable civilian refugees, military men were going AWOL. The empty shops and homes were a prize for the looters, and the military police were into the act too, requisitioning anything with wheels to get themselves and their loot on the road. Sitting here on the Stella Maris, he can feel pleased with his own effort. Not bad for a cripple the wrong side of 30. They found the Zero, damaged but unburnt. Plenty of gen there, and maybe the pilot, or at least an airman who spilled enough beans. The attack was no more an invasion than Pearl Harbor was. No troopships, the carrier fleet quickly withdrawn to safety, ships, air and port facilities destroyed so that the Japanese can act without interference to their Asian conquests, conserving their forces for the sea battle that must inevitably come, concerned about their limited supply of pilots and planes. Bradley feels he'll have plenty to bring to the table at HQ. He's earning his keep. He looks back to where his prisoner sits, shoulders slumped, and remembers he's found a notebook for him. Still a couple of hours in the crossing, so might as well spend it with him. At the least, he might improve his own grasp of the Japanese language, maybe even a bit of the culture. He goes into the cabin and sits down next to the airman, showing him the notebook. "I've found this for you. If you like, we could both work on our language skills." The man smiles and bows his head. Bradley takes out a pencil and writes, starting with both their names and rank, working on pronunciation. Bradley's own proves a problem for the airman. "Too many L's and R's, but don't feel bad. I know my Japanese is not very good. I've seen you trying not to smile." The time passes and they stop their lessons when the shore appears out of the heat haze. At the helm, Brother Francis adjusts his course towards what eventually forms itself into the entrance to Darwin Harbour. Bradley is wondering whether the Darwin panic has abated when a loud blast buffets the windows and makes everyone duck. The water explodes 200 yards ahead of them, a boom with the howl of an incoming artillery shell. Brother Francis spins the wheel to get the hell out of here, but Bradley jumps up and goes to him. "No, brother, reverse engine and stop. That's safest. It's a warning shot." He scans the shoreline. There's probably a code, something we're expected to signal. Brother shakes his head. "Nothing we've heard of. Maybe they'll send a boat out to check us over." Bradley rubs his chin. "Bit jumpy, but at least someone's still at their post." He turns to Bates and tells him to keep guard on the prisoner. Then he takes Sweeney up to the prow. "Stand up here with me so they can see our uniforms." Sweeney's not thrilled with presenting himself as a prime target and turns around, scowling at the prisoner. "Probably trying to kill the Jap. Chuck the bastard overboard." He's only half joking. When the explosion stunned him, Toshi's first thought was that Japan had captured the town. Then, what would that mean for him? Before the mountain of water hanging in the air had descended, he dismissed the thought. The red, white and blue stars, crosses and stripes were visible on ship pennants, on flags flying defiantly on taller buildings. He sorts out the mixed feelings this shock has delivered as he watches the lieutenant on the bow waving his hands at the shore. There seems to be no radio, and he might be trying to semaphore with both arms, but the boat is kicking around in the light swell, and with his artificial leg unbalancing him, Bradley has to grab the rail. He continues waving with one hand, while the private sticks both hands in the air in a somewhat ironic surrender. In another 10 minutes, the launch has drifted almost into the harbour entrance without drawing further action from the shore. After some discussion, the engine is restarted and they proceed dead slow into the harbour. Toshi's been wondering what condition the harbour will be in. Now he'll have a use for the notebook the lieutenant has given him, recording what he sees in the port. He observes closely, memorising details to record later, counts many sunken ships, some resting in the shallows, canted over. As they approach the docks, he's pleased to see that much of the port infrastructure has been affected. The long wharf is severely damaged. Shore facilities are reduced to rubble. Oil tanks that he knew from photographs are in ruins. When Fuchida had unloaded his drunken worries on board the Akagi, he'd been critical of the lack of real damage to the facilities at Pearl Harbor. No such mistake here. The launch ties up at a small wharf alongside a sunken ferry, only its yellow roof showing above the oily water. A harassed sergeant is trying to bring order to the wharf, and Bradley points out some boxes on board that Toshi hadn't noticed. When this discussion is over, Bradley comes to him. "We'll have to be careful getting you through the town. Still a lot of disorder here and feelings are running high. Don't worry, you'll be safer as a fisherman than an airman." Although his personal safety is not something Toshi is worried about, he lets them disguise him as best they can. He's been given a kit bag of civilian clothes at the hospital, checked shirt and work pants, and Bates finds him a knitted cap and jacket. With the collar pulled up high, it all seems out of place in the sweaty Darwin heat. The two privates take their rifles and belts from the gear stowed on the boat, and they all disembark. They start walking through the town, Sweeney and Bates with their rifles shouldered. Ashes and soot are everywhere. Fires are long out, but the smell hangs in the air. Cordite, burnt rubber, wet charcoal. Here's an official-looking building, or what's left of it, mostly bombed flat. "The Post and Telegraph Office," Bradley tells him. Toshi remembers a whole city block, telephone exchange, radio, communication centre, a good target. Numerous 500-pounders, he thinks, from high-level betties. Then he sees flowers laid out, bunches and wreaths. Almost all here killed, Bradley tells him, including a whole family. Toshi sees many other buildings fallen into the street. Some military and civilian crews work away at piles of rubble, perhaps trying to recover those buried below, bodies no doubt. Some civilians jeer at their little procession, although not, it seems, from recognition of the enemy in their midst, but probably more at the ineffectiveness of their military to protect them. They approach a large building made of stone blocks, tall walls of pointed arches, coloured glass windows. Toshi sees the Christian cross on its highest spire. Inside its grounds, the Australians stop and remove their hats. Toshi sees a coffin being eased into a black hearse, a funeral ceremony. Thankfully, not the small box of a child or woman. No flags or military guard, perhaps a civilian then, like most of the 20 or so mourners. A priest is sprinkling water over the polished wooden box, intoning solemn words. Another robed man swings a chained vessel that emits smoking incense. Many of the women are weeping, some children are looking bewildered. The principal mourners, perhaps the deceased parents, are supported by others. Toshi feels a sympathetic thickness in his throat. When the windowed rear door of the hearse is slammed down, Bradley leads on down the side of the building. Here now, it seems, is the object of their walk. A military truck parked behind the building, khaki with white insignia, a dull green canvas cover over the tray. One of the truck's 4 doors are ajar. Sweeney points to its broken lock and jabbers onto Bradley. Toshi can never make any sense of this private's fast tongue through almost closed, twisted lips. He shows his officer the loose wires under the steering wheel. Bradley looks disgusted and walks away to a door in the back of the church. Sweeney sits on the running board and takes out a cigarette. Bates unslings his rifle and drops the butt to the ground, a clank as the metallic end hits the paving. He draws a bayonet from the sheath hanging from his belt and fixes it to the barrel, clipping it in place with a loud click that seems to satisfy him. He looks at Toshi and smiles. Toshi eyes the bayonet, not all that different from the Japanese one, shorter but just as sharp-pointed, and with the same evil blood groove along its length that his own drill sergeant said was to help it come out just as quickly as it went in, talking about suction with a grin not unlike Bates's. Toshi knows the groove is really to make the cold steel lighter, stiffer, just like the pieces cut out of his Zero's airframe. It's surprising that something you'd take away makes for a deadlier weapon. The lie had its own sort of truth. Nobody's born to pull the trigger. He remembers the vicious beatings of his basic training, the thrust, twist, out of bayonet practice, brutalizing, cutting away basic sentiment to lighten the spirit, stiffen the will, forge the group. He wonders if Bates has ever killed a man. Probably still waiting. Bradley returns carrying some motor parts, electrical leads and a petrol can, raises his eyebrows at the bayonet and hands the gear to Sweeney, who opens the bonnet and starts working on the engine. The lieutenant brushes his hands, turns to Toshi and points to the broken lock. "We expected this. The truck is too tempting, just the thing for making off with all the stuff that's being looted. Load it all up and get away south." He shakes his head. "This place has been going crazy since the bombing." The Australian looks embarrassed for his countryman. Toshi is sure that Japanese wouldn't work against each other in the same situation, not that the homeland could ever be attacked. The starter motor grinds away without effect, and Bates empties the petrol can into the tank. Eventually the engine fires and they climb on board. Toshi sees more bomb damage as they pass through suburban streets, rows of wooden cottages. They stop at a small collection of timber buildings that Toshi thinks at first is a barracks, but then recognises it as a hospital. Nurses in white uniforms, patients on trolleys, men and women, even some children, many heavily bandaged. What makes Toshi wonder most is that bombs have fallen this far from the harbour. Here's a crater, a wrecked corner of one building, some mistake of the bomb aimers. It can't always be precise, but then he sees the unmistakable signs of strafing, machine gun holes across walls. Soldiers are piling up sandbags alongside shattered windows. Bradley goes off, leaving him to sit with the 2 privates in a passageway. People pass by continually. Most look at him, many stop to stare, some showing contempt, hatred. Toshi returns their gaze. Given the damage here, he can understand their feelings. He tries to remain impassive, but he feels anger burning that most of them look at him curiously, as if he was some sort of freak exhibit, which he is, being only the second Japanese warrior to ever surrender. Against his will, his eyes lower to the ground, his head bows. Is this an exercise in humiliating him, and humiliating his whole nation? Eventually, the lieutenant returns with a young doctor, stethoscope at his neck, white jacket spotted with blood. The doctor gives him a cursory examination, checks the scar on his forehead, his eyes, asks a few questions via Bradley. Any pain? Does he know who he is? Remember how he got here? Satisfied, the doctor scribbles on another of Bradley's forms and hurries off with a nurse. They return to the truck. Houses become sparser when they leave the edge of town. Toshi finds his orientation when he sees the airfield. Many buildings are destroyed as he remembers it, and the follow-up bombing has wrecked most of what they had left. He notes several new aircraft here, C-47 transports, one landing as they pass through a heavily guarded checkpoint, machine guns, sandbags. The airfield is back in action, probably being resupplied. Some American fighters are being placed under camouflage netting. They stop outside a large wooden building, one of the few with minor damage. "Just officers," says Bradley. "Not important enough for your lot." The lieutenant disappears for the rest of the day and is left in the care of Bates and Sweeney. Some other Australians come to his small room to stare and banter with the privates. Toshi takes out the notebook and writes down some English words and their meaning in Japanese characters, and some Japanese words that would be useful to know in English. He sprinkles in some barely legible symbols that he hopes will remind him of what he has seen. He wills himself to remember everything of use. But one unwilled scene arises. The funeral at the cathedral, the weeping. Toshi feels the sadness of the scene again in his throat, tells himself this is war. There would be many, many families mourning in Japan, just as his family mourned for his brother. The conquest has not been without great sacrifice. There would be many parents and loved ones who... He swallows, feels something like fear burning down his throat now. He breathes heavily and returns to his notebook, writing any random words that come to him. Among them, he sees the symbol for wife. Bradley goes through debriefings with his fellow officers. He starts off feeling good about it all. He's come back with the prisoner, some decent info from the man, observations on the Zero, mechanical parts. He has that superior feeling of being the only one that went forward towards the enemy, when most were heading the other way, or at least hoping they could. Only later does he realise that this is a cause of resentment as much as admiration. Frustration starts to burn when he's sitting in conference with his superiors. Yes, his input helps establish that the main purpose of the Darwin attack was to deny port and airfield facilities to the Allies and to destroy shipping, naval forces and merchant supplies, not to soften us up for an immediate invasion. Darwin has been disabled as a base for Allied interference with the next stages of Japanese conquest, such as the landings at Timor. The Japanese carrier fleet has already headed back north, perhaps anticipating the expected naval confrontation with the Americans. Who will win that? And what will be the situation after that? How soon will it really be Australia's turn for invasion? His superiors are most concerned about how their advice is to be shaped for our masters down south. Take the pessimistic view that we have a severe and urgent crisis, then we look bad, letting this disaster happen. Take the more optimistic view that it's all over now and there's time to prepare for the future, then we run the risk that the men and material needed here might be slower in coming. Bradley feels contempt for this self-serving game. He learns that he won't be in on the recovery of the Zero. That's fine with him. Others are welcome to any glory in that. He found the thing. Plenty of work here now to reinvigorate him, to give meaning to his life. He's confirmed they can expect more air raids, probably land-based from Ambon, but we will surely put up a better show next time. More Allied forces will be brought up to Darwin, particularly American aircraft and support services. There'll be better gunnery, air power, more downed airmen to find and question. He knows about defending a country against aerial attack. He's one of the few here with any experience. All stuff he can get his teeth into. So he's appalled when told he's to go south to a staff position. They make it sound like a good thing. Get out of harm's way, a nice desk to put whatever's left of his legs under, half your luck. Have to look after our heroes. Yes, he thinks, pushing paper and missing out on the action. The choice opinion he expresses on this only serves to cement their assessment of him. Best that he goes with the truck down south, make sure the Japanese man and the Zero parts get there safely, maybe get some more info out of the bugger, and take a lot of our files safely out of Darwin, some Yankee stuff too. It's all important, needs a reliable man. Back clearing his office and fuming, he thinks that if they knew what they were doing, he mightn't feel so bad about it. But their performance thus far doesn't give him much faith. Cartons for transportation keep arriving, but the pile from Government House takes the cake. Bradley's is one of the few well-protected trucks heading south, and his space is much in demand. But the Governor's vice-regal flunkies have brought in his cellar stock and valuable crockery for transport to a safer place. It's lain around untaken since the bombing, and Bradley has no wish to change that status. Terribly sorry, he'll say, the truck is full of important military cargo. He's made sure of that. Looking over the wine and spirits, he notices that several beers have been inserted in place of purloined bottles. His governorship will be lucky to see any of his grog back. Bradley thinks maybe he has room aboard for one bottle. Should he feel any shame that he's no better than the looters? Not at all. The whole schmozzle here is a failure of leadership, so why shouldn't the top knob take some stick? He selects a nice scotch, and in its place donates another bottle of beer. The road to the south. It's another day before Toshi sees the sun again, and then he's transferred quickly to the truck, where he's allocated a seat on the rear bench of the cabin. He notices that the lieutenant has given his service revolver to Bates, who sits in the front passenger seat beside Sweeney. The rifles have disappeared, presumably into the rear of the truck, which is now heavily loaded. Bradley eventually appears and takes his place in the back with Toshi, who wonders if this arrangement is to facilitate further questioning. Perhaps it just allows for their continuing language improvement, which seems to be a source of satisfaction for the officer. He seems far from satisfied right now, though, barely acknowledging Toshi with a curt bow and issuing orders to the two men in a way he hasn't seen before. They seem to sense his bad mood and keep silent as the truck grinds its way out of the airfield. Before they've gone far, the road is clogged with vehicles of all types. Eventually, they see what's causing the delay. A checkpoint, operated by two soldiers. "Provos, military police," Bradley says, his lip curling. The pair seem to be searching vehicles and removing some items before waving the vehicles on. "Checking for deserters, looted stuff," Bradley snarls, "and taking their cut." He puts on his officer's cap and exchanges a nod with Bates. When they pull up at the checkpoint and the Provos approach, Bates jumps out with hands on hips, the revolver on his belt. Toshi sees he looks mean and quite ready to put a bullet through anyone that lays a hand on the truck. Bradley thrusts an arm out of his window, holding some papers. A Provo comes to take the papers, but Bradley's not letting go, so the man has to crane up to read, lips moving. After a moment, he steps back and gives Bradley a salute and some sort of apology. Bates jumps in again, and they drive through. Sweeney laughs and jokes with Bates, but Toshi can see the lieutenant is seething, and he remains quiet for the next couple of hours. By this time, they are well out into desert country, and Bradley seems to have become more depressed than angry, staring off across a barren plain, which appears to give him little pleasure. He turns to Toshi, shrugs, points to the procession of cars, trucks, all running away. "It must seem shameful to you, this breakdown of order, lack of leadership. It's sad for me. What do you think of it? Toshi considers what he has seen and heard, the signs of panic, lack of preparation, a people unready for total war. He shakes his head. A month, and we conquer this country. It comes out all wrong. He hadn't meant to boast, merely to express regret, a warning of what could happen if the situation wasn't corrected quickly, and sympathy for the man who was doing the best job he could under the circumstances. Bradley doesn't seem to take offence, though. He gazes out at the desolate plains, the harsh mountains rimming the horizon. I doubt it. We've been trying for over 100 years. Toshi thinks it's a good time to change the subject. The officer is particularly morose, and he fears he may have offended him. He picks up his kit bag and opens it for the notebook. There's the dull brass of the old bugle. Ah, the bugle, says Bradley. Can you give us a tune on it? Brighten us up? Sorry, I can't play it. Toshi puts it back. He's not here for their entertainment. He holds the notebook up for Bradley to see. Really? The sergeant who gave it to you told me you were quite good. He can't play it either. Bradley's thin lips crease in a smile. Okay, some language. They work away on topics the Australian seems to think will be useful to him, that is, mostly to do with incarceration. Let me out. I want the toilet. I wish to exercise. Are there any books I can read? I am too hot or cold. I would like to write a letter. Although nothing could be further from Toshi's needs. Bradley grows a bit more cheerful. He pulls out a worn tourist phrase book and shows it to him. The Japanese phrasing is often appalling, but Bradley assures him the English is good enough. They work through some conversations. What time do you close? May I have breakfast in my room? Bradley points out. Could you please play a foxtrot? He laughs and knocks on his artificial leg. I won't be needing that one, nor you, for a while. He goes on quickly. But someday you'll go back home. Dance again, if that's your style. Do you have someone waiting? Toshi nods. I married, but had to leave almost immediately. Bradley sighs. The war. We're all men without women. He remains quiet again for a moment, then reaches into his pocket and takes out a wallet, withdraws a tattered photograph, and gazes at it. Here, look at this. Toshi takes the photograph, interested to see Bradley's Australian woman. The photo is roughly torn in half, a small, pale bride in Japanese ceremonial dress. Sachiko. Completely taken by surprise, Toshi's hand flies to his mouth, but not in time to cover his shock. From the half-smile on Bradley's face, he knows his connection to the downed aircraft is given away. He is the Zero pilot. His new life he sees as fragile, able to be blown away in a puff of wind. He hands the photo back. Do you know her? Bradley asks. Toshi shakes his head. Useless, but what else can he do? Bradley pauses and then hands the torn photo back to him. The Australian's face bears a different smile. Sympathetic, comradely perhaps, a sense that we're all in this mess together, deceiving, doing what we think we must. Keep it, Minami. You might come across the chap it belongs to. The truck deviates from its southward journey, taking a rough track to stop at a camp spot that Sweeney has suggested. A swimming hole gleams beneath spreading trees, an oasis after their hot and dusty drive. With a whoop, Sweeney throws his clothes off and leaps into the cooling water. Bradley follows more slowly, hopping on one leg. Toshi sees the scarred body, old burns, flying injuries. He looks with some discomfort at the stump, the discarded leg, but the lieutenant seems to feel no shame. Why should he feel shame? He is greater for the loss. He has his honour. Bates is left to keep guard, and he signs to Toshi that he too can swim if he wants to. The cool water is certainly appealing, but something holds Toshi back. Fraternising with the enemy, dropping his guard more than he should. Duty even in the trivial. He shakes his head. Bradley calls to him. "Oh, come on, Minami, it's great. Think of Bates. He won't be able to cool off either if you don't come in." Hearing his new name called feels like a small release from old duties. Toshi starts stripping. Bates grins and drops the belt and revolver in the truck to join in. Toshi steps in gingerly, but Bates dives in, his large mass sending a wave of cold water over Toshi. Sweeney has to make an offensive remark about the naked Japanese, and at the first opportunity ducks him under the water. He holds him under a little too long, and Toshi can hear the officer bellowing at him. But when Toshi comes up spluttering, he retaliates by ducking Sweeney under, to yells of encouragement from the other two. A moment later, the general horseplay is interrupted by Toshi, suddenly serious, remembering his travels with the Tiwi. "Are there crocodiles?" he asks, miming the snapping jaws. "No," says Bates with a crooked smile and a sinuous mime. "Just snakes." "Ah, good tucker," says Toshi. The Australians pause in surprise before they burst out laughing. That night, they camp in a small gully off the road. The oppressive heat of the day is replaced by a desert chill, and the privates build a campfire. The Australians put on their heavy service jackets, and Toshi pulls on a woolen jersey. He eats the army rations and drinks their style of tea from a metal mug that scalds his lips. After finishing his dinner, Bradley throws the rest of his tea into the bush and pulls out a bottle, holding it up for them to see. It's about 3/4 full. "Single malt tonight. Any takers, gentlemen?" They're all takers, and he splashes a good serve into each mug. Toshi savours the aroma, intensified by the hot mug, and sips gratefully. A long time since he's had any sort of liquor, and out here it tastes so good. Refills all round. It looks like the officer has decided they'll finish it off. Toshi cradles the mug in his hands, stares into the fire, and thinks about Sachiko's photo. He's glad he has it, wishes he had her letter too, the moving one that came with the Senenbari. He feels the belt under his shirt, the raised stitches. He recalls the tears she spoke of. No, it was best that the letter was back on the ship, was safe from the prying eyes of his captors. He feels resentment growing towards the man that had found him out, invaded his innermost thoughts. Why shouldn't he delve too? He points to the wings on Bradley's jacket. "You were a pilot?" The past tense. "Yes, England, Battle of Britain." He must have seen Toshi's eyebrows shoot up in the firelight, for he goes on. "There were quite a few of us went over there, Canadians as well, South Africans, Poles. If you had the training, they could use you. Did all right too until I was shot down over the channel. Flew Spitfires." He grins at Toshi. "Now there's a fighter. Even better than the Zero." He would enjoy debating this over the scotch, pilot to pilot, but he senses the bait, warier now of the Australian. "But your Spitfire was shot down." "It wasn't always about the plane. In the end, I met up with someone better than myself. Lucky to escape with my life." A Japanese would think he was lucky to lose his life for emperor and country. "Before or after the event?" Toshi ignores his cynical tone. The ingrained military code rolls off his tongue. "Duty is as heavy as a mountain. Death is as light as a feather." "So this explains those military suicide attacks we hear about." Toshi nods. "This is the Bushido code of honor we Japanese have lived by for hundreds of years." "Hundreds of years? I'm not sure about that." Bradley moves his leg for more comfort. "Seems it's too easy to convince young men to throw their lives away by stuffing their heads with honor and spurious tradition. Probably more something your political leaders refurbished." Toshi points to the leg. "But you made your sacrifice, fought bravely. Why did you do it?" Bradley shifts uncomfortably. "Bit of a lark, an adventure. always ready to join in a fight. This is the code we Australians have lived by for for quite a few years. We don't go in for suicide, though. Never? Are we so different? Aren't there some circumstances where you might suicide? Bradley considers this. His tone is half flippant. Yes, when the whole world's gone mad and I'm the last sane man, perhaps then. He reaches across and shoves a log further into the fire, a shower of sparks. And maybe that's getting closer. The next day, the road seems to go on forever through featureless country. Toshi remembers long train trips as a child where he was sure it was possible to die from boredom. He tries to concentrate on remembering the few vehicles, all military, that pass by, heading north so he can enter them in his notebook. Personnel trucks, artillery, and anti-aircraft weapon. The presence of US equipment is ominous. The heavy vehicles are turning the road into a muddy ruin. This so-called highway is nothing more than a dirt pathway. Toshi doesn't dare to look at the photo of Sachiko, but he can see her in his mind. He daydreams, drifting towards sleep as the truck rumbles along in the hot afternoon. Another hot place, but cooled by the sea. Spray blown into their faces, Sachiko squealing as he lifted her towards a cliff edge, drenched, her mouth clamped on his. And then autumn, stamping of feet in the cold, their wedding, clinking of raised swords, raised glasses. The start of the rest of their lives. The soft, warm body. Sachiko's fierce arms around him. The weeping, the departing, and the vows of love. He knows with painful certainty that she will be true to those. There's a bang, a skidding stop, and Toshi is back in the sun. A puncture. They all get out, stretching their legs. A tyre has been ripped open by one of the many jagged stones that litter this place. Bates stays on guard duty while Sweeney sets about changing the wheel, the lieutenant watching on. Bates offers Toshi a cigarette, and the pair lean against the truck, smoking and staring at the landscape, Bates with his thumb hooked in the revolver belt. Here the ground seems to be acres of small rocks, a few low bushes. The hills in the distance are also bare, but painted with different strata, yellow, red. Nothing much green. Bradley is cursing. The ground is difficult for the jack, and the wheel nuts are welded tight. The lieutenant has a go at it, but his leg isn't helping. Nor is Sweeney, who is weak or being creatively incompetent to get himself out of the job. Bradley glares at him. Useless as a spare organ at a wedding, you are, Sweeney. Swap with Bates. Bates steps over, handing the gun belt to Sweeney, and the more muscular man is happy to throw himself into the action. Sweeney replaces him, straps on the belt, slaps the revolver, and leers at Toshi. Want to go for a run? Don't shoot anyone unless I say so, Sweeney, calls Bradley over his shoulder, unless perhaps yourself. Toshi feels his face and neck stiffen, tensing with deep frustration, anger at himself. Is his future no better than to be subject to people like this? To give power over himself even to a low man like Sweeney? And to provide entertainment, too, for the stupid man starts showing off with the revolver, doing cowboy impersonations, quick draws Tom Mix style, spinning the cylinder with his finger, fanning the hammer with his palm in rapid-fire imitation, all with sound effects. The work on the tyre is going better, but the officer looks at Sweeney with exasperation. Put the bloody thing away, you idiot! Sweeney complies, gunslinger style, blowing imaginary gun smoke away from the muzzle, spinning the gun on its trigger guard on the way to the holster. Which doesn't quite work. The gun spins in the air and drops to the ground. Before the Australian can bend down, a switch is thrown in Toshi's head, or rather his legs, without conscious thought. They spring him into a dive low across the ground, full length. One hand snatches up the gun, a shoulder knocks Sweeney's legs out from under, then he hits the ground, rolls, and is back on his feet, pointing the gun before any thought has come to him. He switches aim from man to man. "Sweeney, you friggin' moron!" Bradley roars. He stalks towards them, his breathing deep, getting himself under control. Toshi's breath is more rapid. His heart pounds. "No sudden moves, men. Come in close. Slow." The lieutenant stares into Toshi's eyes as he approaches, speaks calmly, reasonably. "You don't want to shoot, Minami. What would that achieve? Nothing. You've done your duty, fought in the air. Now it's a different life for you, just like it is for me." Toshi swings the gun, menacing each of them, but his mind is in chaos. No plan prepared for this. Shoot all three? Force them away and escape in the truck? To where? Now they have edged closer around him. Unlike him, they have a plan. He will only have time to kill one before they jump. "Get back!" he screams. He swings the gun to Bradley. It's cocked now, just inches from the lieutenant's forehead. "Get back, or I kill your officer!" "Yes," Sweeney whispers. No love lost there, but even he's closer, trying to redeem himself. Bradley's stare bores into Toshi, his blue eyes wide, a flicker in the left one, a tremor at the edge of that sardonic lip. Fear? Yes, but something else. Toshi swings the gun to his own temple. The chaos in his head screams, no, too soon, more time, but will is stronger than thought. He pulls the trigger. A loud click, a misfire. He pulls the trigger again as Bradley reaches for him. Another click. Bradley has seized Toshi's arm. He forces the gun into the air. His face is in Toshi's face, his eyes wild. "Be careful, man. There is one bullet in there." The truck has moved on. No one has spoken. Toshi has stopped shaking, but his shirt is soaked. Bradley sits with his flask in his hand, a cigarette trembling at his lips, the odour of whiskey about him. After many miles, Toshi finally speaks, halting, and so soft in the rumble of the truck that the Australian has to lean close to hear. "I can never return home. Can never see my wife, my family again. Never contact them, never tell them I'm alive. I am a captive, the greatest insult. Alive, but I have failed to give this life for Japan." He swallows, looks out at the dry plain. "When I crashed, I would have been reported as killed in action because it is inconceivable that a Japanese would allow himself to be captured. The shame is so great. They will have told my family I was a hero of the great Darwin attack. My wife will be mourning me. I am dead to them, and they are all lost to me." In this emptiness, nothing appears to move except for the truck's enormously elongated shadow in the lowering sun, streaking over barren ground towards the painted hills as they continue down the long road to the south. Sand. Toshi's father sets the service urn down on the bench in his garden shed. It had not been difficult to convince his wife that this unadorned receptacle should be replaced by a commissioned piece to match Katsuro's. The new urn stands nearby, fine calligraphy fired into its glazed surface, a beautiful object among these orchids and bonsai. It will look well in their garden. The lid proves difficult to remove. Perhaps the Imperial Navy does things differently from the Army. Gentle heat eventually releases the seal and he can finally look inside. The weight of a man's ashes had surprised him before, but this time it's the colour. He reaches in, his old fingers slip easily through the substance, and he brings up a handful, golden, dry, granular, smooth, bleeding through his fingers. Sand. He sits to think about this. Perhaps an army man's body is more likely to be found whole, whereas what would be left of a fighter pilot, incinerated already, most likely, may be mixed with the earth where he crashed. He spreads some newspaper on the bench. He wishes he had some fine white paper at hand, but after all, the newspaper is full of the glorious triumphs of Nippon, the creation of the greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, the Hakko Ichiu, the unification of the 8 corners of the world under one roof, the sweeping away of colonialism. Australia was colonial, wasn't it? The British? Toshi will forever be a hero of that victory at Darwin. He notes that his mind is wandering and gently returns it to the task at hand. He takes the container and sifts the entire contents through his fingers onto the paper, looking, feeling for the remnants of his son. He remembers there was a fragment of bone in Katsuro's urn, remembers cradling that tiny piece in these old hands. A great sadness comes over him as the last of the sand runs out, with that rush of the last grains through an hourglass. Nothing. Of course, a naval pilot is likely to be lost at sea, but if lost, why not found? He quickly dismisses this unruly thought. Such hope is corrosive, dangerous. Better to accept the hero's end rather than... what? The Navy has been wise, rich in symbolism. This golden sand could only have come from the shore of the tropical sea where Toshi now rests. He runs his fingers through the sand, feeling for something of the ocean, a small piece of shell. He holds the sand to his nose to smell the sea, but it is neutral, bare of any symbolic comfort, industrial. He funnels the sand into the new urn, looking for a way to seal it permanently. He thinks of permanence, of death. He thinks of worse than death. Shame. Thinks of worse than shame. To outlive your own children. Part 3. A Captive in the South. March 1942 to June 1942. Oh, to be hidden in a cleft between great rocks, someplace far away, with no fear of being seen there to bear my pains alone. Monk Saigyo, 1118 to 1190. The Red Cross. After 3 months of captivity, Toshi is on his second notebook and has acquired a dictionary. He hasn't seen Bradley again since arriving south and being transported to country Victoria, where he's been kept locked up in a number of Air Force establishments. Several other Australian officers have had their own questions and interest in practicing Japanese, so his English is coming along well. It's been an absorbing exercise for him. He wonders what national characteristics others hear in Japanese, because he has problems discerning how to characterize English as a language that represents the people that speak it. From the many German newsreels he had watched in Japan, the celebrations of European conquests, the military instructional films, there's no doubting the command, the certainty of second-person imperative, a voice that knows who's in charge and doesn't mind you knowing it. The cliché rings true, as does the French and Italian, romantic, emotional, sophisticated, unambiguous. What of English, then? Dogged restraint? Meaning business? Cunning? He still thinks in Japanese, cannot imagine it ever being otherwise. He finds the inexactitude of English too much of an obstruction. Every rule of grammar, spelling and pronunciation is broken by countless exceptions, and that's before trying to grasp the true meaning of what is being said, each word weighed down so often by metaphor. A mongrel language, words whelped out of a string of unknown bitches, pedigree impossible to trace back purely to one shining origin. In the mouths of its native speakers, he suspects a reasonableness that might conceal intent, its devious ambiguity as slippery as a haiku carp. Over these months, he is questioned many times by a variety of men. Often it begins with sympathy for his plight and encouragement. You did your bit, your war's over, it won't be forever, sit it out, cop it sweet. He notes this new idiom in his book. The questioning is never forceful, usually apologetic. "Sorry to bother you, but our masters need some more convincing about your story. Want to be sure you're the gunner you say you are. You know what they're like." Then he would be off, proving his knowledge of that role, the things such a man must know, techniques he's been taught, the missions he's fought, the names and dispositions of fleet elements at different times, the rumours he might have heard. Later, sometimes much later, he would be re-questioned for consistency, and he'd find himself offering more information to back his story. He had earlier decided that the only way to be consistent was to be truthful about everything except the one thing that must be concealed: his identity. One day, a new sort of man comes to talk to him. Perhaps 50, silver-haired, stoutly filling a well-made civilian suit, armband with a red cross on his left sleeve, white shirt, striped tie, the formal effect given a tone of permanent casualness by the right, empty arm of the suit tucked neatly down into the coat pocket. Shaking hands, Toshi finds his right greeted with the left, and he ends up grasping it with both hands, a somewhat more intimate greeting than he intended. The man introduces himself as Dr. Schuder and says he is of Swiss nationality, though living in Australia for many years, and has the honour of representing the neutral Red Cross organisation in matters to do with the Geneva Convention, specifically on the rights, treatment and well-being of prisoners of war, such as his good self. While he goes on to outline these rights, the Australian uniformed man who's standing by, perhaps to protect this courtly visitor from frenzied attack, scowls at the Swiss man as if he's just spoiled the party. Toshi listens initially with scepticism. Can you believe there are neutral nations, neutral organisations? This is a world war, after all. When the man speaks of international laws governing countries at war, he knows it is irrelevant. Japan would never submit to any but its own laws. From school days, he has learnt of Kokutai no Hongi, the cardinal principles of imperial Japan, that Japan is divinely created as an exceptional nation with a manifest destiny to supersede other powers with its own superior values. When he hears about the Geneva Convention, he regrets the lack of instruction within the Japanese military about what to do if captured. The concept has always been unthinkable. He learns that he cannot be forced to give anything more than name, rank, and serial number, and that torture and death are out of bounds. If this is true, and the scowl on the guard's face seems to add plausibility, it confirms for Toshi the weak-mindedness of the West, which will be their downfall. But he wishes he had been aware of this sooner. When asked if he has any complaints about his treatment, though, he offers none. The Swiss man must have seen uncertainty in his eyes over the serial number, so he asks the Australian soldier to demonstrate, which the man does with bad grace, pulling from under his shirt a small metal plate attached to a chain around his neck. Dog tag, they call it. Toshi notes the number of digits stamped on it. Possibly he has had such a number, but never the humiliation in the Imperial Navy of being tagged like a dog, even in his basic training days when he was treated worse than a dog, smashed in the face for the slightest imperfection, ritually beaten for no other reason than to reshape the mind, to meld the individual into the group. To him, such a number seems to be of no more use than a Tokyo street address. You have to understand the makeup of the whole to locate the part. In truth, he is, or was, Imperial Navy, 1st Carrier Division, Carrier Akagi, Fighter Squadron 1, Leader Pilot of Shotai 3. What number could tell you things like that? For the nondescript hordes of the Imperial Army, perhaps? Not for the Navy. He makes up a number that will be of acceptable length, something he can remember, his father's birthday in reverse, and the year of the Emperor's reign that the Zero was unleashed. The next time his interrogators call, he gives them no more information, insisting that he is only following their own regulations. After this, the polite men stop visiting him. The Provos. Toshi finds himself relegated to the care of the scowling men. They are larger, menacing, more suited to their function of controlling captives and miscreants, of controlling bodies rather than minds. What little spoken English they offer is usually unambiguous, apart from the occasional colloquialism which he collects. One day, he's told to pack his swag, that he's moving out. He's become used to being told nothing, to being moved so many times, always to another Air Force establishment. Today, he decides to ask where he's going. When told to mind his own business, he asserts his right to know under the Geneva Convention, suspecting that the guard is likely to be no more familiar with such rules than he is. The guard wrinkles his nose as if Toshi has farted, then shrugs. Who cares? The Big Smoke, Melbourne. His transportation arrives that afternoon, a paddy wagon, as he now knows it from frequent use. It's an Australian Army one with its 2 military police, khaki-clad rather than the blue-shirted Air Force men. He wonders whether this marks a new stage in his captivity. The 2 MPs, burly men, sullen, pat him down, his soft canvas kit bag too. The suspicious lump of the metal bugle gets checked by the bigger MP, who raises an eyebrow and hands the bag back. They load him into their wagon, where he has the back compartment to himself, a cage covered with tarpaulin, 2 metal unpadded benches along each side, no room to stand. He has air and a view through the gridded rear door that clangs shut, locked. Toshi looks out at an airfield as they leave. 4 biplanes are circuiting under an overcast sky, 2-seater basic trainers. One putters to the ground, bouncing clumsily before settling on the grass. Then the engine growls and it climbs back into the air to go round again. The Allies are keeping up a supply of pilots. After the airfield, it's a couple of hours of open land, grasses, eucalypts, small farm holdings, green country, not like the desert areas he'd seen in the north. Here and there he sees small towns with verandas along their shop fronts. Gradually, this gives way to outer suburbs, then industrial areas, more densely built housing, some city streets, the Big Smoke. As they drive through Melbourne, Toshi looks out at everything that unrolls behind the wagon. Trams, streets wide and narrow, crowded footpaths, many men in uniform, some uniformed women too. Perhaps some Americans, he thinks. Cars, American and English, makes he knows from back home. Dodges, Plymouths, the smaller Austins. Some cars with strange bags on top of them, running on gas perhaps. Are they having to improvise? Eventually, they're through the city centre and into more suburbs, long, flat streets, sometimes children reclaiming their road from the passing wagon. One lot of boys has an oval ball they punch from one to another. A teenager breaks free and races after the wagon, bouncing the ball on the bitumen, then dropping it to his foot as he runs. The ball slams into the bars in front of Toshi's face. The kicker turns to his friends and raises his hands in triumph. The wagon circles around a few blocks before stopping outside a run-down house, or perhaps half a house, as it has 2 front doors and yards. The MPs get out and approach the place. The smaller man, and he is by no means small, jumps over a fence and heads down the side of the house. The larger one goes to the front door and knocks, or rather smashes his fist repeatedly against the wooden door. Faces appear at the front window curtains, and the door is opened by an older woman. Some conversation ensues, polite enough by the look of it. Toshi is wondering what this has to do with him. Perhaps nothing, he hopes, some other MP business, when there's a loud shouting from inside. The MP shoves the woman aside, no longer polite, and charges in. More male shouting is joined now by female screaming, finally lapsing into quiet. The noise brings out some curious neighbours. A little boy comes close to the wagon to look in through the bars. He has gapped teeth and large spectacles, one glass pasted over with brown paper, the same treatment to encourage a lazy eye they use at home. Toshi smiles at him, and the boy's free eye stares back with unnerving intensity. Toshi, feeling like a monkey in a cage, says hello to prove speech. The boy's gaze never wavers. Now the MPs emerge with a bellowing Australian man, unwilling in their custody. The smaller MP has a military kit bag looped over his shoulder and holds the man's left arm locked behind his back. The other MP has a headlock on the man and a truncheon in the other hand. The man's face is bloodied, but he continues to struggle and shout. Quite a crowd is gathered by this time, plenty of women from the house and elsewhere, men and neighbourhood children. Most of the noise they make is abuse directed at the MPs. As the smaller MP drops the bag and unlocks the wagon door, the man lashes out and gives him a mighty kick in the backside with his heavy army boot. The crowd yells and cheers in appreciation. The MP turns, his fist clenched, but the bigger MP, whom Toshi now takes to be the senior, says no and brings his truncheon down on the man's head twice, upends him and throws him headlong into the wagon. The crowd yells again. They seem to appreciate the performance from either side. The wagon takes off to more cheers. The man picks himself up, pulls himself to the gridded door and yells out to his family and neighbours. He's laughing as he turns to Toshi. "Did you see that? Got one into the bastard. Worth it." His smile fades as he sees the Japanese face. His eyes widen, then thin down into an expression of hate. He sits down on his bench. This man would be a soldier, although an overweight and stupid one. A deserter by the look of it. How many more would have deserted when the threat of Japan arrived on their mainland? Toshi turns back to the view. "What are you looking at?" The growl is obviously directed at him, but he chooses to ignore it. He hopes he's not going to share the wagon with this man for too long, or worse, a cell. He shudders. "I said, what are you looking at?" He isn't prepared to share even his English with this man. He adopts a polite mime show and speaks in Japanese. "Sorry, I don't understand." The man is enraged. He seizes Toshi by the shirt and pulls his face into his own. "Speak English. We speak English in this country." Toshi smells the soldier's heavy breath, beer, vomit, blood. He raises his arms between the man's arms and sweeps them apart, easily breaking his grip, but it's all the excuse the man needs. "Want to try it on, do ya?" A huge fist swings up and hits Toshi in the jaw. He feels himself lifted from the bench before he crashes back down. The man is on him, kicking him, grabbing his hair and smashing his head against the hollow bench. There's shouting from the cabin and the wagon screeches to a stop. The door flies open and the senior man looks in, sees the blood on Toshi's face and says, "Oh, shit." The deserter is all nervous smiles and bluster now. "Wait's right, mates. He started it and I finished it. All over." The MP lays into him with his truncheon, body and head blows. Toshi is amazed at how much punishment the man can absorb. Plenty of hits are fended off by his meaty arms, but enough get through, though the man still seems to be copping it with surprising sweetness. Eventually, the MP tires, looking annoyed and frustrated. He nods to his colleague with the kicked bum, who's holding something in his hand. Toshi thinks it's a cigarette packet at first, but then the man threads his fingers through the 4 holes that ring one edge of a heavy metal block. He smiles at the deserter as he makes it snug in the palm of his hand. Now the deserter looks frightened, holds his palms out and says, "Nah, mate, no offence." The first blow is so fast Toshi doesn't see it until it's sinking into the fat on the man's ribs, and then another to the face as the hands come up too late to defend. Toshi closes his eyes and tries to shut out the thudding and cracking sounds, the screams. He will be next, he supposes. No Red Cross gentleman here. The door clangs shut and he opens his eyes. The wagon moves off again. The deserter lies moaning and weeping over his feet. Toshi makes out some broken words. "Set the provos on me, would ya? I'll fucking kill you." Pentridge. Toshi looks out at a castle. The paddy wagon has been driving for some minutes along these great walls built from large blocks of grey-blue stone. There must be a sizable township within. He sees guard posts and barbed wire along the top of the walls, hears shouting and the swinging of gates. He realises this is a prison, but one built on a huge scale, the walls massive enough to keep an army out. or in, grim, and excessive intimidation. He's processed, his body and kit searched, his false name entered on more papers without challenge, the injuries to his head, both healed and recent, noted and patched. They want to know about the latest injuries, and he describes the incident, all conducted in dumb show and his halting English. No one has any Japanese. Notes are made and a paper is put in front of him to sign. He does so, as there seems no point in refusing. What happens to Minami Tadeo seems of little relevance. They can do what they like with him. He keeps the real Toshi walled up within this false identity just as securely as these stone walls keep their prisoners. The military policeman and their battered deserter have disappeared, and he is led by 2 prison guards into a huge cell block. Toshi feels a growling noise swirling in the air as they march him through its courtyard, sees himself surrounded by 2 stories of barred doors. As they ascend iron stairs and pass along the metal walkways, he is aware of faces through the bars, of shouts. The noise builds in intensity, words are indistinguishable, but the meaning is clear. A door is swung open and Toshi looks into a cell, 2 bunks, one of them occupied. He realizes he is shivering, hesitates in the doorway and is shoved in from behind. The door clangs shut. The other prisoner sits up on his bunk. A Japanese face. Toshi drops onto the other bunk, sitting with elbows on his knees as if he's just completed an exhausting run. He stares at the man, someone like himself. Same age, same mixture of clothing, a workman's shirt and trousers. "Welcome. I'm pleased to have your company." The accent is regional, Kansai dialect, the formal greeting given with a touch of irony in these circumstances. "I am called Hakuin Ekaku." Toshi's eyes widen. "You were named after the great Zen master?" The man doesn't answer, but smiles for the first time, an embarrassed smile. When Toshi catches on, he wishes that he'd thought of it. The name of an 18th century guru would be meaningless to the Australians, as good as any, but would be instantly recognised as false and ignored if news ever reached Japan. There was no danger of any family being accidentally shamed. Toshi introduces Minami to his new comrade, and they converse for the rest of the afternoon. The Japanese words feel good in his mouth, in his ears, although tempered by the caution they both feel. It would be nice to discuss where they came from, their families, their fighting experiences, but neither is prepared to move outside their adopted identities. He thinks it's probably true that this guru was bomber aircrew, shot down during the follow-up attacks on Darwin. Toshi takes in everything, noting what seems authentic. He will use it to strengthen his own persona. The progress of the war in the months since Toshi's capture is also of interest. The Imperial Navy victorious in the Battle of the Java Sea, the Philippines consolidated and General MacArthur driven off, New Guinea invaded by the Imperial Army as well. The planned bombing of Darwin has continued, but without fighter cover, since the carrier fleet is occupied elsewhere. Flak there has become more effective as the gun crews gain more experience and numbers. Once captured, the Guru had been flown south quickly in a US Dakota, one that had been fairly empty. To Toshi, this seems to indicate that the traffic of men and material is heading north, rather than in retreat. He thinks of Fuchida's predictions of growing American might. In the next months, the number of captured airmen grows by 4 more, named respectively for a Great War battleship, a 16th century poet, and 2 temples in Kyoto. Each new Japanese arrival is greeted by the cell block criminals with the same raw, hate-filled and triumphant, and each provides a little more news. Not all of it is necessarily to Japan's advantage, but much has been gained, and the old colonial powers will find it hard to wind back the clock on this new sort of empire. One report stuns Toshi, however. His own carrier, the Akagi, has been sunk at Midway. Worse, not just Akagi, but all 4 carriers from the Darwin fleet. Fuchida has finally had the showdown he desired, carrier-based planes in a great battle where neither fleet laid eyes on each other, exactly as he had predicted, but with the reverse outcome. After Toshi hears this, he takes to his bunk. He has tried not to reveal his place in the fleet, but his comrades sense something and leave him alone. Perhaps he has already been coming down with the infection that seems to sweep through the prison, for he finds himself feverish and vomiting, genuinely sick. He's taken to the infirmary, where he has time to think about the friends he's lost, the huge ship that had become his home, the crew that were his family, and Fuchida. What has become of him? The sickness and grief ease with time, and life in Pentridge, as he now knows to call it, goes back to its uneasy routine. After an early brawl, the Japanese are kept apart from the civilian criminals as far as possible. They're given daily time in a small yard, and they try to make the most of it with regular exercise based on the punishing military regime they had been accustomed to. Guru Hakuin, true to his name, wants them to sit for meditation, and the others fall in. Although the Guru claims it is an essential aspect, Toshi finds the posture on the stone floor painful, and so he talks one of the friendlier guards into getting them a small mat, which 5 of them crowd onto. The Guru can have the pain to himself. The battleship suggests another use for the mat as well, and before long is leading them in judo practice. An extra cell is cleared of bunks, and they crowd into that to eat their meals off small tables. The food is plentiful, but entirely Western. Meat, mostly stewed mutton, always potato, and something green. Once a week, fish is served, but in a thick flour batter, fried in a foul-smelling fat. The main meal is followed by a sweet dish, usually processed fruit with a yellow sauce. Toshi accepts it all, but like the others, he craves their own style of cooking, especially rice, which only appears rarely and then always as a sweet. He's never hungry, as he often was in his military training and even aboard ship. He doubts whether criminals and captives in Japan would be fed so well. But when they used to eat with these criminals, there were frequent disturbances about the food. In fact, there always seems to be a simmering anger ready to break out on any pretext. Not too much copping it sweet among the Australians here. Toshi hasn't seen the overweight army deserter again, but there are many more fearsome threats among the criminals. One day, the Japanese are sitting at meditation, distracted by a growing rumble outside that seems to be developing into a full-scale riot. It moves closer and, when someone starts banging on their door, the Guru instructs them to keep sitting, facing the door calmly, after the example of the Zen master who faced his assassin with such serenity that the man went away, fearful. Toshi has never felt it a practical strategy, and certainly not now as the door gives way and a number of ugly criminals burst in. When their leader sees the Japanese, his face breaks into a toothless grin. Toshi and the battleship jump to their feet and the others follow. They'll be outnumbered, and some of the criminals have weapons, bedposts as clubs. If this is the way it's going to end, so be it, but not without doing some damage. "Defend the corner," Toshi yells. "Disarm them." A hopeful scenario. Airmen are not noted for their unarmed combat skills, but 5 form a defensive line with their backs to the corner, the Guru behind them. The grinning leader approaches, tapping his weapon in his other hand, raising it almost casually, but the battleship jumps forward, seizes the raised arm and pulls the man towards him, topples him over his leg and twists the club free. Toshi grabs the club just before another blow descends from a second man. He thrusts the club into the man's face like a spear. The man's blow still carries through on Toshi's shoulder, but the poet gains the weapon and brings it down on another skull. Toshi and the poet lay about them with the sticks, but the convicts rush in low, bringing the temples to the ground. Toshi sees the Guru kick a tackler in the head, but it's developing into a grappling melee in the corner, and Toshi knows it's only a matter of time. With a shriek of whistles, guards rush into the room, swinging long nightsticks, laying into the men and yelling at them to drop their weapons. The criminals raise their arms. Toshi senses relief but gets a painful blow to the elbow from a guard, perhaps because he was a bit slow in dropping his own weapon, or perhaps because the man saw it as too good an opportunity to be missed. After that, the Japanese are kept mostly locked away, for their own safety, says the guard who gave them the mat. He and Toshi converse at times, and the notebook of English gains some more words and phrases. The guard even shows him some Australian newspaper reports. More Japanese victories in Burma and at Bataan in the Philippines. A US bombing raid on Tokyo. Toshi finds this last fanciful. The Allied press will be trying to raise spirits, surely. Nevertheless, he worries about his family. Near the end of June, men of the Red Cross visit them. The Japanese are questioned about their treatment and given notepaper and encouraged to write letters. They're promised that such letters will be delivered through the neutral authorities, but Toshi doesn't take up the offer. The shame of capture would devastate his family's honour. He wants to preserve the fiction of his death at all costs. But what are those costs? Others write and seem to enjoy it as a sentimental exercise, but he doubts the addresses are any more real than the names. After that, they're moved into a lower security area and a bit more open exercise is possible. The sunlight is appreciated, but the closer contact with criminals, even model prisoners like themselves, is sometimes menacing. The friendly guard gets him a better English-Japanese dictionary, and he uses it to puzzle over the newspapers and magazines that come his way. One day, this man gives him a bit of inside information. The airmen are going to be moved to an even lower risk area, an internment camp in the country. He explains this internment. Not criminals like this lot here, all sorts of people born in countries we're fighting, Germans, Italians. There'll even be other Japanese that were caught up here when things blew up. Businessmen, pearl divers, always been a lot of them here. A place to keep an eye on them, be well looked after. He paints a nice picture of it. Pretty good from what I hear, my word. None of these big walls. Fresh air, open spaces, plenty of sky to look at. Healthier. Warmer than here too, much warmer. A fair way to the north, outside a town called Hay. Toshi suspects that this has been forced on the Australians by the Red Cross inquiry into their Pentridge experience. There's something to be said for being a model prisoner. He won't miss the big smoke. This is the end of CD3. The book continues on CD4.